Chapter 42:31. Tian couldn't help but frown as he looked at Liu's cold expression. He hadn't expected Liu to still be so cold after he mentioned Su Qing. However, he was right. Since the life and death hunting ground was a place where life and death were determined, it had to be absolutely fair. If someone followed and protected them, it would indeed disrupt the balance of life and death, making the life and death hunting ground meaningless. The life and death hunting ground was indeed very fair. Even the Academy's teachers had to face life and death when they entered the hunting ground. It seemed that it would be impossible for Tian and the others to obtain protection from Liu. "Do you want to enter the life and death hunting ground or leave?" Liu asked coldly, clearly somewhat impatient. Tian fell into deep thought, unable to make a decision. Zhu Shi did not say anything. He had no opinion. If Tian wanted to enter the hunting ground, he would follow. Su Yu waved her hands, indicating to Tian not to enter the life and death hunting ground. Although Tian was the hidden dragon Marshal Kuei, the life and death hunting ground was a place of true slaughter. No one would care about your identity. Everyone who entered the hunting ground only had eyes for slaughter. Tian was too weak. Entering the life and death hunting ground was akin to courting death. After a moment's thought, Tian's gaze darkened as he coldly spat out, "I'll enter." Zhu Shi glanced at Tian and said gravely, "I'll accompany you." "You." Su Yu looked at the two with a helpless expression. After hesitating for a long time, she finally nodded. Tian glanced at Su Yu. He originally didn't want the latter to follow, but Su Yu had been in the Bloodwings Academy longer than him and Zhu Shi. She knew more and should be able to help. He had thought it through. If they encountered any danger, he would let Su Yu hide in the Nine Extremities. "Have you thought it through?" Liu asked coldly, looking at Tian. "Yes." Tian nodded, a different kind of confidence in his eyes. "Follow me." Liu did not have much of a reaction. She said coldly and led the way. Moments later, Tian and the rest arrived at the entrance of the life and death hunting ground. "Listen up. Once you enter the life and death hunting ground, everyone will be your enemy." Liu's gaze swept across Tian and the other two as she said in a cold tone, "It's not too late to back out now." "Thanks for the reminder." Tian smiled faintly and gestured for Liu to open the hunting grounds passageway. Liu frowned. Without saying anything more, he opened the life and death hunting grounds passageway. This was a dark and gloomy path. It was like a long, dark snake, giving off a feeling of unknown fear. Tian was the first to step into the passage, followed by Su Yu and Zhu Shi. The three of them walked for about 4,000 to 5,000 meters in the dark tunnel before finally arriving at the real entrance of the life and death hunting ground. Tian stood outside the life and death hunting ground spirit formation gate and let out a long breath. Then he took a step forward. When his foot landed, he was already inside the life and death hunting ground. The instant he entered the life and death hunting ground, Tian felt a wave of blood assaulting his face. He could not help but frown a few times. Su Yu and Zhu Shi's figures appeared after him. Their expressions were similarly not relaxed. How many people have died here for there to be such a strong smell of blood? The corner of Zhu Shi's mouth twitched a few times as he spoke in a heavy tone. "I heard that the life and death hunting ground was established not long after the Bloodwing Academy was founded. In these millions of years, who knows how many warriors have lost their lives here?" Su Yu frowned. She did not seem to understand why so many people would enter the life and death hunting ground despite knowing that it was a place of slaughter. "The reason we came here is to confirm if White Demon is truly in the life and death hunting ground." Tian observed the surroundings as he said, "We cannot stay here for too long. It's best if we leave before anyone discovers us." Zhu Shi nodded. They did not come here to capture White Demon. They only wanted to confirm if White Demon was in the life and death hunting ground. Up until now, their understanding of White Demon had come from the mission token. They had no idea how strong White Demon truly was. The life and death hunting ground had many exits, but they were all at the edges. Once they entered the depths of the hunting ground, Wanting to return to the exit would be extremely difficult. Tian and the other two tried to move forward. After walking for several dozen kilometers, they could clearly feel the smell of blood in the air thickening. Tian kept his perception on the map scroll, but the dot of light was constantly flickering. It was very difficult to accurately pinpoint it. Su Qing had previously explained that because Whiteman's soul aura had changed, when the map scroll approached White Demon, some unexpected situations might occur. Following that, the three of them walked another several dozen kilometers. According to the map scroll, Niet Tian should be getting closer and closer to White Demon. Niet Tian, are we still going deeper? Suyu was clearly a little afraid at this time. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Niet Tian nodded, indicating for Suyu to follow closely. There was no need to be too nervous. The three of them cautiously continued walking deeper into the life and death hunting ground. After several hundred kilometers, they were nearing the heart of the life and death hunting ground. However, Niet Tian could still sense the dot of light on the map scroll. It was very strange. Niet Tian, let's go back. Suyu quietly arrived beside Niet Tian and whispered, let's go a little further. Niet Tian frowned. They had already walked so far. If they just went back like this, it would be a pity. Suyu, don't be too nervous. The life and death hunting ground is so vast. As long as we are careful, no one will discover us. Zhu Shi smiled, comforting her. Suyu gently nodded, but her face did not relax in the slightest. She had heard that there was a group of people in the life and death hunting ground who killed for the sake of killing. These people entered the life and death hunting ground purely to kill people. These people were known as the emissaries of slaughter. If they met the emissaries of slaughter, they would be in deep trouble. Just as Suyu's mind was wandering, Niet Tian, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Suyu's heart skipped a beat as she asked nervously. Niet Tian waved his hand slightly, gesturing for her not to make sound. Someone's coming. Zhu Shi's face changed. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The smell of fresh blood and flesh is wonderful. Just at this time, a low voice could be heard. It seemed to be very far away, but it also seemed to be right in front of them. Niet Tian's face changed, and his heart was in his throat. Zhu Shi was equally nervous. She looked around, trying to determine the source of the voice. Three little fellas, you guys came at the right time. I'm hungry. Following that, the low voice sounded again. Then, a ghost-like figure flashed in front of Niet Tian's group and disappeared. Niet Tian's eyes trembled, and he was a little shocked. Chapter 42:32. Niet Tian suddenly sensed a change in the map scroll. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. Could this person be White Demon? Be careful. At this time, Zhu Shi cried out in alarm. Frozen end energy erupted from his body, and a giant ice shield appeared, protecting the three of them. Pung! In the next moment, a muffled sound rang out, and the ice shield directly shattered. Immediately after, a scarlet aura rushed towards Niet Tian. Niet Tian took a step forward and almost subconsciously raised his arm. A fierce force swept past and directly pierced through his shoulder. Niet Tian's body swayed for a moment before he steadied himself, but blood flowed out, dyeing half his body red. Niet Tian, are you all right? Zhu Shi looked around, loudly shouting, obviously trying to lock onto the person's position. I'm fine. Niet Tian felt a strange force surge within his body, causing his blood to tumble and his blood to become unstable. But he took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing this strength, and responded in a deep voice. Suyu was so frightened that her face paled. She hid between Niet Tian and Zhu Shi, not daring to make a single sound. I didn't think your strength would be so good. Even after being pierced by my extreme Yin energy, you are still fine. At this time, a deep voice echoed in the void, carrying with it a hint of playfulness. It seemed to come from all directions. Extreme Yin energy? Niet Tian's eyes trembled. He immediately recalled that the evil Yin martial art that White Demon cultivated was called the Nine Wolf Extreme Yin art. Could this hidden person really be White Demon? You are White Demon? Zhu Shi had the same thought as Niet Tian. He roared out loud. The void fell silent. After a long time, another extreme energy broke through the air. It was fast to the extreme, attacking Nietion and the others. But this time, Zhu Shi was prepared. The surrounding space was filled with frozen end energy, freezing time and space. Wherever that extreme energy passed, it left behind a clear trail. Moreover, its speed was much slower than before. Upon seeing this, Zhu Shi called out, "Nietion." Nietion understood tacitly. The sky sword streaked across the sky, and an incomparably vigorous sword chi suddenly erupted. The sword shadow was like a snake, rushing out along that trajectory. Bang, bang, bang. In the void, the sword shadows were invincible. Wherever they passed, large areas of giant trees and boulders were smashed, and a deep gully that was thousands of meters long appeared on the ground. The power of this sword was enough to split mountains. Unfortunately, the person hiding in ambush did not show himself. Nietion frowned. It seemed that the person was very smart and had already moved. However, he couldn't even pass through Zhu Shi's ice wall, so he shouldn't be very strong. Right at this moment, another 3 strands of extreme energy appeared, and they actually tore through the air from 3 different directions. They were incomparably swift and fierce, and they were lethal. Zhu Shi's face darkened, and then the vigorous frozen energy in his body exploded. The power that rolled like the sea froze everything and blocked the 3 strands of extreme energy. At this moment, Nietion opened his devil's eye. Wherever his vision reached, a dark figure was lurking in the void, like a wolf in the night, waiting for an opportunity to attack. "Come out!" In the next moment, he growled. Where the sky sword pointed, the sword's shadow whistled out, pressing towards the dark figure. Bang! With a muffled sound, the frozen time and space shattered, and a bloody figure flew out, smashing heavily on a giant rock. Nietion's figure was like lightning, and in a flash, he stretched out his hand and directly grabbed that person's neck. That person's whole body was dripping with blood, and his eyes were surging with lax light. He stared at Nietion, and there was an inexplicable smile at the corner of his mouth. Just at this moment, Nietion suddenly felt a strange force surging in his body, and it actually made his blood boil. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body also took a few steps back. Seeing this, Zhu Shi immediately rushed over, and with a palm, he sealed that person's neck. Then, he supported Nietion and asked, "Are you okay?" He was very curious as to why Nietion was suddenly injured. With Nietion's strength, it was impossible for the person in front of him to kill him. Nietion steadied his body and took a deep breath. The blood in his body that was boiling slightly calmed down, and his complexion returned to normal. He frowned. He was also very puzzled as to why his blood suddenly became unstable. "Who are you?" Seeing that Nietion had recovered, Zhu Shi turned to look at the person with ice powder, raised his hand to remove the ice powder, and asked in a deep voice, "Humph, humph, humph, humph." That person ignored him, and a pair of eyes flashed with a cold light, staring at Nietion with a sinister smile. "This aura, you..." Looking at that person, Nietion suddenly sensed something, and his expression suddenly changed. He was horrified on the spot. "Boy, you're about to die, and I'm afraid you don't even know." That person laughed, and a strange cold aura surged around his body. At this time, Zhu Shi also reacted, and his expression changed. He suddenly looked at Nietion and said a name, "Ming Yufeng." Nietion's eyes were cold, and he nodded solemnly. That's right, the cold aura that they felt from the person in front of them was the same aura that Ming Yufeng released when he sneak-attacked Nietion. Ever since Nietion was sneak-attacked by Ming Yufeng in the 10,000 yuan pavilion, he had felt that his breathing was not smooth and his blood was unstable. He originally thought that once he recovered a little, he would be able to force out the remaining cold energy in his body. But he didn't think that the cold energy would be so strange. It was as if it had completely fused into his bloodline, and there was no way to force it out. Just now, This person in front of him had released the same cold yin energy, causing the remaining cold yin energy in Nietion's body to become active and injure him. He couldn't understand why Ming Yufeng would release the same cold yin energy as this person in front of him. What you cultivate is the Nine Wolf extreme yin art. Nietion became cold. He coldly stared at that person and said in a deep voice, "So what?" The person coldly sneered, not afraid in the slightest. "You are White Demon." Nietion's eyes darkened, and he coldly said, "So you came here for my master." The person's eyes trembled, and then he sneered, "But you are too stupid to dare come here to find my master. Even if you know my master is hiding here, you won't be able to leave here alive." "Master?" Nietion looked at that person, and his complexion changed. He asked in a cold voice, "White Demon is your master." "Humph." The person coldly sneered and arrogantly said, "Since you are about to die, I might as well tell you. I am only an avatar of my master. Even if you kill me, you won't be able to find my master." Nietion's complexion darkened. He asked, "Why do you say I'm about to die? You have been struck by the Nine Wolf extreme yin art, don't you know?" The person laughed and said, "I didn't think that besides my master, there would be someone else who cultivates the Nine Wolf extreme yin art." Nietion's complexion darkened, and his heart was filled with raging waves. So the method that Ming Yufeng used to sneak attack him was the Nine Wolf extreme yin art. Chapter 42-33. Ming Yufeng was the same as White Demon. He also cultivated the Nine Wolf extreme yin tactic. This was something Nietion didn't expect. Was there some relationship between Ming Yufeng and White Demon? It shouldn't be. In the next moment, Nietion suddenly thought of a possibility. His eyes trembled and his expression froze. Su Qing had guessed that for White Demon to hide in the Blood Wings for so long, it was highly likely that he had changed his identity. Was it possible that Ming Yufeng was White Demon? This thought shocked Nietion. It took him a long time to calm down. "I didn't think that the Ming family's young Master Ming Yufeng would appear so glorious on the surface, but he would secretly cultivate such a sinister martial art." Zhu Shi's face darkened. Cold, he clenched his fists. "Boy, your Nine Wolf extreme yin curse has already seeped into your bloodline. When the 9 extreme yin wolf seals are complete, that will be the moment you die." At this time, the self-proclaimed avatar of White Demon wildly laughed. His eyes were blood red, but there was no fear in them. Rather, there was a strange and abnormal look in his eyes. "Speak, where is White Demon?" Zhu Shi's complexion darkened. His eyes were filled with killing intent. An ice blade appeared and pierced into the man's chest. Blood slowly flowed out. As long as he used a little more strength, he could pierce through the man's heart. "Master is in the life and death hunting ground, but it is impossible for you to find him, because before you see him, you will already be dead." The man didn't fear him at all. He wildly laughed, extremely arrogant. "You are courting death." Zhu Shi's eyes flashed. He roared out loud, but before he could move, sword energy suddenly appeared and cut off the man's head. Zhu Shi turned to look at Nietion. He didn't think the latter would be so decisive. It is impossible for him to say anything. There is no need for us to waste time on him, Nietion darkly said, his face cold. He could already feel the extreme yin energy in his body condensing into the phantom of a wolf's head. This should be the extreme yin wolf seal that this man spoke of. The phantom of a wolf's head was an extreme yin wolf seal. Once all 9 extreme yin wolf seals appeared, the 9 wolf extreme yin curse would take effect. Nietion had been under the curse for about a day and had formed an extreme yin wolf seal. At this speed, he still had 8 days before the curse took effect. In other words, he had to find a way to remove the 9 wolf extreme yin curse within 8 days. Then what should we do now? Zhu Shi looked at Nietion, very worried about the latter's condition. "Brother Zhu, you and senior sister Su should go back first." Nietion frowned and said in a deep voice, "You want to find White Demon alone?" Zhu Shi's expression changed, and she couldn't help but become angry. "We came together, so of course we have to go back together. Brother Zhu, We are already close to the center of the life and death hunting ground. I have no idea what kind of opponents we will meet next. Tian looked at Zhu Shi and said, I can feel that the nine-wolf extreme curse inside my body is very unusual. If I can't get rid of it in time, my life will be in danger. I'll grab it. White Demon, I have no other choice. There is no need for you to follow me into danger. Zhu Shi's eyes darkened. He said, Tian, I only came here with you because you are a friend. If you think that I, Zhu Shi, am not qualified to be your friend, then I can leave right now. Tian frowned. He didn't think that Zhu Shi's reaction would be so intense. Brother Zhu, since it's like this, then let's go. After thinking for a moment, Tian lightly said, Zhu Shi nodded. There was no fear in his eyes. Rather, there was a hint of excitement. Then, the three of them began to walk deeper into the heart of the life and death hunting ground. Along the way, Tian focused his mind to sense the changes in the map scroll. He determined that they were constantly approaching White Demon. They were extremely careful and their speed was slow. They avoided many people who were in a life and death duel. Around half a day later, Tian suddenly felt a second extreme wolf seal appear within his body. Tian, what's wrong? Zhu Shi sensed that something was wrong with Tian. He worriedly asked, underestimated the nine-wolf extreme curse. The first extreme wolf seal took an entire day, but the second extreme wolf seal only took half a day. At this rate, I'll only have one more day left. Tian frowned and said in a grim voice, This. Zhu Shi and Su Yu's complexions changed. They clearly didn't expect the situation to be so urgent. Let's continue. I can feel that the true White Demon isn't far from us. Tian was extremely calm. He stared off into the distance. Zhu Shi nodded. Although his expression was firm, he couldn't help but feel a bit flustered. He was worried that the curse seal within Tian's body would suddenly activate. He didn't know what the consequences would be if the curse seal activated. If Tian lost control, that would be disastrous. With his current strength, even if he faced Tian in his normal state, his chances of winning were still unknown, let alone Tian, who had lost control. With this worry in his heart, Zhu Shi's complexion couldn't help but sink. Then, the three of them walked for another several dozen kilometers. Tian's complexion became increasingly worse, and from time to time, extreme energy would leak out from his body. Tian could feel that the extreme energy had spread throughout his entire body. His breathing was greatly obstructed, and his chest felt as if there was a giant boulder pressing down on it. Tian, can you still hold on? Zhu Shi stepped forward to support Tian. He didn't expect the latter's condition to deteriorate so quickly. In less than a day, Tian was already unable to withstand the nine-wolf extreme curse. This curse seal is so insidious. Su Yu's beautiful eyes trembled. She supported Tian from the other side. She had seen with her own eyes that Tian could even withstand Min Rinchio's aura, but he couldn't withstand the power of the curse seal. It was enough to show how insidious the curse seal was. Ming Yufeng looked bright on the outside, but he secretly cultivated this kind of evil martial art. It was truly too sinister. These years, in order to cultivate the nine-wolf extreme curse, Ming Yufeng must have killed many people, especially the female disciples of the academy. Ming Yufeng was originally very attractive to the opposite sex, adding on his illustrious identity, who knew how many innocent young female disciples were infatuated with him. Huang Ling and Lai Yin were the best examples. Damn, that Ming Yufeng. When I return, I will definitely expose him to the academy and ruin his reputation. Su Yu looked at the pained expression on Tian's face and clenched her fists as she spoke. At this time, Tian's body suddenly trembled. He violently spat out a mouthful of blood. It was actually filthy black blood that emitted an evil aura. Tian. Zhu Shi hurriedly supported Tian and shouted anxiously. The eighth one. Tian took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Zhu Shi's face suddenly darkened. Of course, he knew that Tian was talking about the 8th extreme wolf seal. The speed at which the extreme wolf seal spread had exceeded their expectations. Once the 9th extreme wolf seal appeared, the 9-wolf extreme cur seal would completely activate. Zhu Shi, listen carefully. If I lose control, don't show mercy. Tian forcefully endured the intense pain in his body and stared at Zhu Shi. Chapter 42:34. Bang! In the dark void, a majestic power rolled out, condensing into the phantom of a giant black wolf that pressed down on Tian's group. In an instant, Tian's group of 3 felt an oppressive pressure. Their complexions changed and their eyes filled with unconcealable fear. Retreat! At this critical moment, Zhu Shi roared. The energy of frozen end erupted from his body. An incomparably large ice wall appeared in the void, like an ice giant. But in the next moment, the black wolf phantom fell down and the ice wall collapsed. Zhu Shi was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. His body shook and he flew backwards like a broken kite. Zhu Shi, Su Yu's eyes trembled. She rushed towards Zhu Shi, but Tian was like a wooden statue. He didn't move at all. His eyes turned as black as the night, emitting a cold light that chilled the heart. The black wolf's strength was mostly consumed by the ice wall. The remaining impact didn't make Tian retreat even half a step. So you caught Zhu Shi. The latter's body was covered in blood, and he had fainted. She looked at Zhu Shi and then at the abnormal Tian. She didn't know what to do. And at this time, a dark figure descended from the sky like a ghost. A pair of dark eyes were like a wolf in the night. They coldly stared at Tian, cold light constantly emitting from them. White demon! Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. His lips curled up, and he shouted out a name. His eyes were monstrous and had already turned pitch black. His face was covered with dark runes. These were the god and demon reverse runes. It's been more than 30 years. My own name actually sounds a bit unfamiliar. The dark figure spoke in a low and hoarse voice. He was White Demon. He never thought that someone would be able to find him. Is that so? Tianling laughed. God and demon energy surged around him. This dark and oppressive aura was even more terrifying than the extreme energy. Boy, it wasn't easy for you to come here. How about becoming one of my avatars? White Demon walked out from the darkness, revealing a face as thin as bone, just like a skeleton. His expression was a little strange, as if he admired Tian very much. Tian's face was solemn, and he didn't say anything. Kid, you've been hit by the 9-wolf extreme curse, yet you're still alive. This is truly surprising. White Demon opened his mouth once more, saying, If you are willing to be my avatar, not only can you dispel the 9-wolf extreme curse, but you can also increase your strength. To you, this should be a very good choice. I'll kill you and use your blood to dispel the 9 wolves extreme curse. Tian's eyes were gloomy. He took a step forward and his killing intent exploded. Kill me? Whiteman's pupils shrank, as if he had heard a joke. He wildly laughed. With just you, me? Tianling calmly responded. At the same time, the sky sword appeared in his hands. Sword energy erupted, pressing down on White Demon. Whiteman's figure flickered. He lifted his hand and a strange strength gushed out, immediately disintegrating the sword shadow. At the same time, Tian felt a bone-chilling cold rush towards him. He leaned to the side and a trace of blood appeared on his neck. White Demon cried out in surprise. He didn't think that Tian would be able to avoid his attack. Tian stabilized himself. The power of divinity and demons erupted. Sword intent soared into the skies. His sword slashed out. The sword shadow was like a mountain, hurtling towards White Demon. White Demon didn't fear this attack. Instead, a cold and contemptuous smile hung on his lips. He thrust out his palm, and a black wolf phantom appeared, blocking the sword shadow. Pum! In the void, a muffled explosion sounded out. Tian was sent flying backwards. As he stabilized himself, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Brat, you aren't bad. You were actually able to last until now. White Demon coldly glared at Tian. He coldly smiled. To be able to last 2 days under the influence of the 9-wolf extreme Een curse, you are the first. The power of your bloodline is indeed strong. It can actually resist 9 extreme Een wolf seals. But how long can you last? Nyetian wiped the blood from the corners of his lips. There was no fear in his eyes, only a thick, killing intent. The 9-wolf extreme Een curse within his body already had 9 extreme Een wolf seals. He had opened his divinity body and was using the power of divinity and demons to resist these extreme Een wolf seals. He didn't know how long he could last, but in this battle, he could not lose. Come, Nyetian crazily roared. Sword intent erupted from his body once more. His aura suddenly rose several times over. Interesting. I'm becoming more and more interested in you. White Demon felt the oppressive sword intent rush towards him. A blazing light surged in his eyes. This was the first time he had seen someone with a bloodline that could resist the 9-wolf extreme Een curse. The 9-wolf extreme Een curse was a curse seal formed by fusing a woman's extreme Een blood. It could destroy nearly all bloodlines. If I can obtain the strength of your bloodline, then my 9-wolf extreme Een curse will surely rise to the next level. White Demon wildly laughed. He leapt up, his body transforming into a terrifying black wolf in midair. Oh! The black wolf emitted an angry howl, deep and terrifying, as if it could swallow all. Kill! Nyetian's eyes darkened. With a deep roar, the sky sword cut through the air. The brilliance of the sword illuminated the night. The sword's shadow was like a falling river of stars, crashing down on the black wolf. Punk! In the next moment, there was a loud explosion. The sword's shadow collapsed, but the black wolf was unharmed. Nyetian's eyes trembled. He didn't think that the black wolf would be so terrifying. Its strength surpassed his imagination. And at this moment, a black light appeared. A sharp energy tore through everything, fast to the extreme. Nyetian immediately reacted. He wildly retreated, but he was still a step too slow. His left arm was cut off. His figure wildly retreated. After landing, he stabilized himself. But half of his body was bleeding profusely. It was a frightening sight. Nyetian. As Suyu saw this, her face paled and she cried out in fear. I'm fine. Nyetian's eyes were gloomy, incomparably cruel. He directly sealed the wound on his left arm. Brat, it seems I underestimated you. To be able to persist like this, you're not bad. White Demon transformed into human form. He coldly smiled, his eyes filled with a playful light, like a hunter toying with his prey. Bang! And at this time, Nyetian's body shook. An even more violent aura erupted from him. Demonic and divine energy soared into the skies, billowing like a flood. White Demon frowned, a bit puzzled. He could clearly feel that Nyetian's strength had reached the limit. So how could he still have such an imposing aura? Strange pupil. But in the next moment, he realized something was wrong. He could sense that Nyetian's eyes were surging with a boundless power that was trying to break through the limits of his martial body. Chapter 42:35. Boom! In the dark night, the sword in the sky erupted with its strongest attack. The sword fell, and boundless sword chi surged in all directions. Immediately, rocks were sent flying as the sword pressed down on White Demon. Too weak, White Demon coldly stood where he was. His lips curled into a sneer of disdain. His body released dense Een chi that enveloped the surroundings. It actually dissolved the sword's pressure. He was already at the peak of the 9th layer of the Tianjue Saint Emperor. How could a first layer heavenly tribulation saint ruler like Nyetian resist? He hadn't used his full strength just now, which was why Nyetian could last so long. However, he was shocked. There had never been a saint ruler who could stand before him for so long. Furthermore, Nyetian had just stepped into the heavenly tribulation realm and was afflicted with the 9-wolf extreme Een curse. Kid, it's over, White Demon said coldly as he walked over. He really wanted to feel just what kind of bloodline was so powerful that it could resist the 9-wolf extreme Een curse. Nyetian trembled. The dark aura in his eyes dispersed, and the demonic and divine inscriptions on his face also began to disappear. He had already pushed the power of the demonic and divine body to the limit, but he was still too weak. He could not resist a peak heavenly tribulation, Saint Emperor. Spurt. He endured the pain, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He wanted to say something, but he vomited a mouthful of blood. He could feel the nine-wolf extreme, curse, slowly devouring him. His consciousness was quickly becoming blurry. Suyu hugged Zhu Shi. She was already scared silly. She looked at Nie Tian like a block of wood, but there was nothing she could do. A powerful bloodline is so exciting. At this moment, White Demon had already walked to Nie Tian's side. His withered eyes flashed with a strange light. He was clearly very excited. Over the years, because he cultivated the nine-wolf extreme curse, his body had endured a large amount of extreme qi, causing his martial body to age prematurely. He was only a few thousand years old. He was still a young cultivator, but his martial body was almost rotten. He couldn't last much longer. A powerful bloodline could slow down the aging of the martial body and extend his lifespan. For the past 30 years, he had hidden in the life and death hunting ground, killed countless martial practitioners, and absorbed their bloodline power to survive until now. However, those bloodlines were still too weak. They could only prolong his life a little. However, Nie Tian's bloodline was different. This was the first time that White Demon had seen someone with a bloodline that could resist the nine-wolf extreme curse. He guessed that Nie Tian's bloodline could completely cure his martial body's premature decline. Even if it couldn't, it could still greatly extend his lifespan. That was why he was so excited. Nie Tian stared at White Demon, both of his eyes trembling. One could clearly see traces of blood in them, a dark red that was suffused with a thick, killing intent. Even at this moment, his will did not give in at all. "Brat, go on your way in peace." White Demon coldly smiled. His demonic hand stretched out like a wolf's claw as it came crashing down. But at this moment, a dreadful red light appeared. It fell down like a curtain of blood, so fast that it couldn't even blink, sharp enough to tear through everything. In the next moment, White Demon miserably cried out and hurriedly retreated. As he stabilized his body, he discovered that all 5 of his fingers had been neatly cut off. He suddenly looked up. The person that appeared in front of him was not Nie Tian, but a peerless beauty, a face as cold as an iceberg that could topple cities. You are. White Man's eyes trembled with horror. Fear was written all over his face, and even his voice trembled. He couldn't figure out just where this woman in front of him had come from. This sudden scene left Suyu dumbfounded. As she stared at this cold woman, she was momentarily stunned. She couldn't imagine that there was such a perfect face in this world. Rui Qinyu. At this time, Nie Tian's deep voice sounded out. Then his body shook and he fell to the ground. The one standing in front of him was no one else but Rui Qinyu. Nie Tian. Rui Qinyu reached out a hand to support Nie Tian. As she felt his aura weaken, she frowned. "He can still last a little longer. You deal with that fellow first. I want to use his blood to save Nie Tian." Fat Cat's figure appeared, his voice heavy. It was he who had awakened Rui Qinyu from the 9 extremes and saved Nie Tian in that critical moment. Rui Qinyu had awakened the 10 annihilations, evil woman, and fallen into a deep slumber. Now that she had awoken, her aura had completely changed, as if she had undergone a nirvana transformation. Rui Qinyu nodded. She slowly turned to look at White Demon, the killing intent in her eyes, causing one to shudder. White Demon was locked onto by this killing intent. He was so frightened that his entire body trembled, unable to speak. He was known as the bloodthirsty wolf demon. He regarded human life as nothing more than grass, and he enjoyed torturing and killing others for pleasure. He had killed countless people, and those who died tragically at his hands had all died miserable deaths. He was like a blood hunter who loved to toy with his prey. He had lurked in the hunting ground for decades. But at this moment, as he was being stared at by Rui Qinyu, he felt a sense of powerlessness, as if he had fallen into an ice house. Despair seeped into his soul. This was the first time he had felt the threat of death. But he was certain that the person in front of him was only at the first level of heavenly tribulation. How could she release such a terrifying killing intent? What he didn't know was that before Rui Qinyu had awakened the 10 Annihilation's evil woman, she had only been at the heavenly mandate realm. The awakening of the 10 Annihilation's evil woman had allowed Rui Qinyu's strength to directly leap over an entire realm. The 10 Annihilation's evil woman was a world-destroying bloodline. It was the most powerful bloodline that had ever been witnessed by the world. When the 9 heavens' evil woman descends, all worlds shall be annihilated. Rui Qinyu didn't open her mouth. She didn't make any sound. She simply flicked her finger, and suddenly, a strange blood-red light appeared. It covered the sky and the earth, forming a bloody net that enveloped White Demon. Roar! White Demon instantly sensed the killing intent and immediately transformed into his wolf form. The giant black wolf reappeared, and with a deep roar, its huge body pounced forward. He didn't believe that the woman in front of him had the ability to fight him head-on. But in the next moment, the bloodiest scene appeared in the sky. The bloody net was as sharp as a blade. The moment it touched the giant black wolf, it deeply imprinted itself into the wolf's body. A thick stench of blood spread out, and the giant black wolf was actually cut into neat pieces of meat. The evil woman's first attack after her descent seemed to herald the arrival of a new era. Pieces of flesh fell to the ground like a river of blood. The grass, trees, and rocks were all corroded, and even the ground was collapsing. Suyu watched this scene from the side and was completely scared silly. Her eyes were dull, as if she was having a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. She had never seen such a bloody scene before. The impact on her was too great. Chapter 42:36. Rainy Thousand Leaves held the extreme blood pill in her palm. When she smelled the stench of blood, she could not help but frown. Even though she possessed the 10 Annihilation evil woman bloodline, she was disgusted by the smell of blood. "Give me the blood pill." Fat Cat cried out in surprise when he saw the extreme blood pill. It was as if he had seen a life-saving straw. Rui Qinyu handed the blood pill to Fat Cat. The latter took it and gave it to Nietian to swallow. Rui Qinyu's expression changed slightly when she saw this, but she didn't say anything. Suyu watched from the side. She was so shocked that she couldn't react for a long time. Rui Qinyu was not only beautiful, but her strength was also abnormal. She had killed White Demon in one move. White Man's strength was at the peak of the Tianjue Holy Emperor. He was not inferior to some weaker holy ancestors. But even so, he had been killed by Rui Qinyu in one move. From this, it could be seen how terrifying Rui Qinyu's strength was. Boom! After a while, the extreme blood pill in Nietian's body began to react. His body trembled slightly, and a pungent smell of blood wafted out. At the same time, a thick mist of blood enveloped his body. The extreme blood is working. Nietian should wake up soon. Fat Cat didn't care about the smell of blood and the bloody light. He looked at Nietian and smiled proudly. Rui Qinyu didn't say anything. She just stood there quietly. Suyu had already reacted, but she was a little afraid of Rui Qinyu and didn't dare to step forward. Then, Rui Qinyu was like a block of ice. She didn't move or say anything. She just looked at Nietian. About half a day later, the bloody light and smell of blood on Nietian's body gradually dissipated. However, a thick layer of blood crusted over his body. It was incomparably stinky. "It stinks." Nietian woke up, and the stench made him frown. "These are the filth and impurities within your body." The 9-wolf extreme curse was dispelled by the extreme bloodline. Thus, the filth and impurities were purified as well. This time around, you have profited from a disaster. Looking at Nietian, the Fat Cat could not stop herself from laughing out. In the process of a martial artist cultivation, their martial experience would be greatly improved. At the same time, more and more impurities would gather in the martial body. Powerful bloodline martial artists had a certain ability to expel impurities from their bloodline, So the talent and strength of these martial artists were much higher than martial artists of the same level. But even so, the speed at which the impurities were expelled was far slower than the speed at which they accumulated. Therefore, the higher the stage, the harder it was for a martial artist to improve their cultivation. These martial body impurities were the manifestation of a martial artist's own flaws. They were a great hindrance to a martial artist. At this time, Nietian had expelled so many impurities, which undoubtedly further purified and strengthened his martial body. It was indeed a blessing in disguise. Nietian stood up and saw Rui Qinyu not far away. He wanted to talk to her first, but he really could not stand the stench on his body. Therefore, he found a nearby stream, washed up, changed into a clean set of clothes, and came to Rui Qinyu's side. Qinya. Looking at the girl in front of him, Nietian's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He had a lot of things to say, but he did not know where to start. He could only call out her name softly. The corner of Rui Qinyu's eyes surged with a gentle light, and she nodded gently. She walked to Nietian's side, gently lowered her head, and leaned on the latter's shoulder. Her touch was as soft as ice melting into water. Nietian hugged the softness in his arms, and his heart surged with warmth. After a while, the two calmed down and looked at each other with a faint smile. Nietian introduced Rui Qinyu to Suyu, but the latter still had a silly expression on her face. She even seemed a little afraid in front of Rui Qinyu. Suyu felt that there was a strange power in Rui Qinyu's body, which made her feel a kind of panic that seeped into her soul. "Senior Sister Su, are you okay?" Seeing Suyu's reaction, Nietian could not help but ask awkwardly. He did not want others to face Rui Qinyu with such a fearful attitude. I'm fine," Suyu reacted and quickly covered it up. Nietian nodded slightly, and then walked to Zhu Shi's side. After checking on the latter's condition, he was relieved. Zhu Shi's injury was a little serious, and he was in a coma for a little longer. However, it was not a fatal injury, and he would be fine when he woke up. The group was not in a hurry, and quietly waited for Zhu Shi to wake up. Suyu stayed by Zhu Shi's side, while Nietian and Rui Qinyu walked to the other side. About an hour later, Nietian and Rui Qinyu returned. Suyu saw Rui Qinyu's face was flushed, and she understood what had happened. She couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. However, Nietian did not feel anything. He walked straight over, and seeing that Zhu Shi was still unconscious, he couldn't help feeling a little puzzled. He asked, "Zhu Shi's injury is not too serious. With his strength, he should have woken up by now. So why is he still unconscious?" Nietian, could it be that White Demon did something to young Master Zhu? So you couldn't help feeling a little worried, nervously looking at Nietian. Nietian frowned, and once again checked Zhu Shi, but did not find anything unusual. Helplessly, Nietian handed over the fat cat. The latter carefully checked Zhu Shi's body, but unexpectedly did not find anything strange. "Let's leave this place first. Bring Zhu Shi to Su Qing of the 10,000 Yuan Pavilion. Perhaps he can find something." The fat cat looked at Nietian and helplessly said, "Okay." Nietian nodded and carefully placed Zhu Shi into the 9 extreme beasts. Suyu also followed him into the 9 extreme beasts. Soon, about half an hour later, Nietian and Rui Qinyu walked out of the life and death hunting ground. "You're out." Just as they walked out of the hunting ground, a familiar voice rang out. Liu appeared in front of them like a ghost. "Teacher Li." When Nietian saw Liu, he bowed slightly and called out. Liu stared at Nietian with a strange expression for a while, but did not say anything. Then, her eyes turned and fell on Rui Qinyu. There was an obvious change in her expression. Rui Qinyu looked at Liu with a slight frown, as if she was disgusted. She did not like being stared at by anyone other than Nietian, especially men. "Teacher Li, is there a problem?" Nietian asked awkwardly with a dry cough. Liu's gaze finally shifted away from Rui Qinyu. After a long silence, she said solemnly, "She's very dangerous." Nietian's expression changed. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he did not say a word. "Let's go." Rui Qinyu said coldly and patiently and left. Nie Tian nodded at Li Yu and followed Rui Qinyu. Where's Zhu Shi? At that moment, Li Yu suddenly spoke, causing Nie Tian to stop in his tracks. Brother Zhu is injured. Nie Tian turned around to look at Li Yu and replied, Let me take a look. Li Yu's expression did not change, but the speed of her words was obviously faster. Nie Tian frowned, but he still let Su Yu and Zhu Shi out of the 9 extreme beasts. Chapter 42-37. Nie Tian, Su Yu, and the others were startled by Li Yu's actions. They didn't know what he had discovered to be so abnormal. Let's follow him. Nie Tian immediately reacted. His figure flew into the sky and chased after Li Yu. Rui Qinyu and Su Yu followed closely behind. But Li Yu's speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared without a trace. Nie Tian frowned and looked in a direction. He immediately understood and said, He should have gone to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. They didn't stop and immediately rushed to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Soon, the 3 arrived at the Myriad Yuan Pavilion branch and directly entered the hall. 3 guests, please follow me. As soon as they arrived, a young gray-clothed martial artist respectfully walked over and bowed. The 3 followed the man into the inner hall and saw Li Yu and Su Qing standing there. The unconscious Zhu Shi was lying on the side. How is he? Nie Tian quickly walked in. Seeing that Zhu Shi was still unconscious, he stepped forward and asked. Li Yu gloomily glanced at Nie Tian, but didn't speak. You will know if you sense his divine soul. Su Qing looked at Nie Tian and nodded slightly. Divine soul? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He immediately sensed Zhu Shi's divine soul, and his expression changed. He said in horror, How is this possible? He couldn't believe that Zhu Shi's divine soul was actually changing. It was as if it was being assimilated by some kind of divine soul aura and was being devoured little by little. He never imagined that Zhu Shi's illness was actually related to the divine soul. Before, he had focused on inspecting the latter's martial body, so he hadn't discovered any abnormalities. Zhu Shi's divine soul should have just been devoured, so the changes weren't too obvious. It was very difficult to sense. Carefully sense it again. Su Qing waited for Nie Tian to calm down a little before speaking in a low voice. Nie Tian nodded and took a deep breath. His mental force was like an invisible hand that probed into Zhu Shi's divine soul. What he discovered next left him stunned. After a long time, he finally calmed down. He said in shock, Is White Demon trying to seize his body? He sensed that within Zhu Shi's body, there was another strand of divine soul energy that was currently devouring Zhu Shi's divine soul. At the same time, it was also slowly condensing, as though it was inscribing some kind of mental rune. It was actually extremely similar to the extreme Een Wolf mark in his body. If I'm not mistaken, this should be the 9-wolf soul stealing curse of the 9-wolf extreme Een technique. Su Qing nodded solemnly and said, I once saw the 9-wolf extreme Een art in the Bloodwing Academy's martial pavilion. The 9-wolf soul seizing curse recorded in it is an extremely evil possession technique. Nie Tian and Li Yu looked at Su Qing at the same time, waiting for him to continue. Su Qing glanced at Zhu Shi and said, The 9-wolf soul seizing curse's method of possession is extremely cruel. It uses the soul of the victim as a guide to slowly condense and engrave the soul seizing seal. When the 9 soul seizing seals are completed, the victim's soul will completely disappear, and he will be possessed. As he spoke, he looked at Nie Tian and asked, Nie Tian, what exactly happened to you guys in the life and death hunting ground? He didn't expect that Nie Tian and the others would go directly to the life and death hunting ground after returning to the Bloodwing Academy. Moreover, they had miraculously returned alive from the life and death hunting ground. In just a few days, too many things had happened that exceeded his expectations. Of course, Nie Tian didn't hide anything. He immediately told them everything that had happened after they entered the life and death hunting ground. Even though Li Yu and Su Qing were both calm people, they couldn't help but raise their eyebrows after listening to Nie Tian's story. It was hard to imagine that a few martial artists with the cultivation of heavenly tribulation sage kings could actually enter the life and death hunting ground and kill a criminal who had been hiding for decades. Moreover, this criminal's strength was close to the sky martial divine ancestors. At this moment, Liu locked his gaze on Rui Qinyu once again. His gaze seemed to be saying, "You are indeed very dangerous." With Rui Qinyu's cultivation, she could actually kill a peak Tianjue Holy Emperor expert in an instant. It cannot be said that she wasn't dangerous. Su Qing also seemed to have sensed that Rui Qinyu wasn't simple. He secretly observed her for a long time. Yet Tian saw their reactions but couldn't say anything. He could only ask Su Qing, "Brother Su, since we already know that Zhu Shi has been hit by the Nine-Wolf soul-stealing curse, there should be a way to save him, right?" Su Qing frowned and said, "Although the Nine-Wolf soul-stealing curse is insidious, it isn't a very strong curse. It's just that this curse is a little strange. The most direct way to break it is to use the blood of the caster to break the curse seal. But unfortunately, the caster, White Demon, is already dead." This, Nye Tian was stunned. In fact, he had already guessed this method. After all, the Nine-Wolf soul-stealing curse was very similar to the Nine-Wolf extreme Yin curse. But White Demon was dead, and even the extreme Yin blood pill had been swallowed by Nye Tian. Who else could save Zhu Shi? Nye Tian thought for a moment. Just as he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Su Qing. The latter said, "The Nine-Wolf soul-stealing curse is a kind of divine soul curse seal. The method to break this curse must be guided by the caster's divine soul." Nye Tian frowned, momentarily speechless. He originally wanted to ask if his blood could save Zhu Shi, but it seemed that it wouldn't be possible. White Demon is already dead. Doesn't that mean there's no way to break this curse? Suyu couldn't help but ask, her voice choked with sobs. Su Qing's face darkened. If the curse seal is forcefully removed, it is highly likely that it will harm Zhu Shi's divine soul and cause him to lose his mind. In the life and death hunting ground, I saw one of Whiteman's avatars. That avatar's divine soul aura was very similar to Whiteman's. At this time, Nye Tian suddenly thought of that avatar. Nine-Wolf avatar. Su Qing's eyes trembled. At the same time, he said, "The Nine-Wolf extreme Yin art records that a person who cultivates this martial art can have 9 avatars. These avatars are different from the avatars of ordinary martial artists. They are formed by swallowing the divine souls of other martial artists. The avatar you speak of should have been swallowed by White Demon. His divine soul should have been swallowed by White Demon, which is why he has the same divine soul aura as White Demon." Nye Tian nodded. "White Demon should have more than one Nine-Wolf avatar. As long as we can find one, we can save Zhu Shi." The Nine-Wolf avatar's divine soul was formed after being swallowed by the main body. Thus, it had the same divine soul aura as the main body. It was equivalent to the main body, the caster of the curse. "Where is your mission token?" Before Nye Tian's voice fell, Liu asked in a deep voice. Nye Tian took out the mission token and handed it to Liu. After the latter received the token, his figure flickered and he rushed out. Nye Tian frowned. He didn't think that Liu would care so much about Zhu Shi. "Brother Li, wait a moment." Su Qing knew that Liu had gone to the life and death hunting ground to find Whiteman's Nine-Wolf avatar. But before he could say anything, the latter's figure had already disappeared. "Brother Su, what's wrong?" Nye Tian asked with a frown as he saw Su Qing's actions. I'm afraid that just one of Whiteman's Nine-Wolf avatars won't be able to save Zhu Shi." Su Qing sighed. Although the Nine-Wolf avatars have Whiteman's divine soul, they don't have the extreme Yin Qi contained in his bloodline. Especially after White Demon dies, the extreme Yin Qi of those avatars will become weaker. They won't be able to break the Nine-Wolf soul-stealing curse. Then what should we do?" Suyu panicked as she heard this. "Brother Su, you mean to say that in order to break the Nine-Wolves' soul-seizing curse, in addition to Whiteman's divine soul power, we also need someone with enough extreme Yin Qi in their bloodline, right?" Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Su Qing and asked. Chapter 42:38. Tian's eyes were cold, his lips curling in a cold smile. Su Qing hadn't noticed Tian's reaction and couldn't help but sigh. It's a pity that after Whiteman's matter, the Nine-Wolf Extreme art was burned by Bloodwing Academy. White Demon should be the last person to cultivate the Nine-Wolf Extreme art. Brother Su, I know someone who cultivates the Nine-Wolf Extreme art. Tian looked at Su Qing and faintly smiled. Who? Su Qing couldn't help but ask in surprise. He's someone from Bloodwing Academy. You should also know him. Tian's lips curled up and he spat out a name. Ming Yufeng, the Ming family's young master. Su Qing's eyes fiercely trembled. He asked in surprise, Are you sure? The Ming family was a major aristocratic family. Ming Yufeng was the Ming family's young master, the future head of the Ming family. His status was no small matter. If someone said he cultivated the Nine-Wolf Extreme art, no one in Bloodwing Academy would believe it. I'm sure. Tian firmly nodded. He recounted how Ming Yufeng had plotted against him. Finally, he coldly said, If he hadn't used the Nine-Wolf Extreme art on me, I wouldn't have been in such a hurry to find White Demon. After Su Qing heard Tian's story, his face darkened. He didn't say anything for a long time. This news was too shocking for him. The Ming family's young master cultivated the Nine-Wolf Extreme art. If this news spread, it would be a huge blow to the Ming family and even the allied aristocratic families. After a moment, Su Qing calmed down and asked, Tian, you want to act against Ming Yufeng? Tian nodded, a cold light surging in his eyes. Ming Yufeng secretly cultivates the Nine-Wolf Extreme art. I don't know how many people he has killed. Disregarding the fact that his life can save Zhu Shi, I also have a death grudge against him. Since he has the guts to kill me, then he should be prepared to be killed by me. Su Qing could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. This was the first time he felt a strong sense of oppression from Tian. Tian, it's true that Ming Yufeng cultivates the Nine-Wolf Extreme curse, but won't be easy for him to admit it. Furthermore, the Bloodwings Law Enforcement Hall is basically made up of people related to the Ming family. Therefore, it's impossible for the law enforcement elders to stand on your side. Tian sneered and said, I don't need him to admit it, and I don't need to go through the law enforcement hall to kill him. Huh? Su Qing was stunned for a moment, then immediately understood and said in horror, You want to kill him directly? He dared to kill me directly, so why can't I kill him directly? Tian's expression was indifferent, but his eyes were clearly surging with cold, killing intent. Su Qing's face froze. He was actually rendered speechless by Tian's question. In his eyes, Ming Yufeng was the young master of a famous family, and his status was very high. But in Tian's eyes, Ming Yufeng was no different from anyone else. He was just a martial artist. This sort of way of looking at people was very direct and tyrannical. Tian, this matter is no small matter. Should we wait for teacher to return and discuss it with him? Su Qing nervously said, feeling very uneasy. If Tian really killed Ming Yufeng, it would inevitably enrage the Ming family. It might even draw in other families related to the Ming family, and it might even stir up monstrous waves within Bloodwing Academy. That sort of situation was absolutely beyond Su Qing's control. Su Qing knew that Tian's identity was very mysterious. Nothing could happen to him. Thus, he wanted to wait for Qing Qi to return and stabilize the situation. I can wait, but he cannot, Tian said as he looked at Zhu Shi. He still remembered that in the life and death hunting ground, he had wanted to go alone to find White Demon. However, Zhu Shi had insisted on going with him, even blocking several fatal attacks for him. Now that Zhu Shi was in trouble, how could he just stand by and watch? Su Qing frowned. He could feel that Zhu Shi's divine soul was being swallowed faster and faster. He feared he wouldn't be able to last another day. Brother Su, senior apprentice sister Su, I'll have to trouble you to look after Zhu Shi here. I will return to the academy. Tian lightly said, then turned and left. Rui Qinyu didn't speak. She only silently followed behind Nie Tian. Soon, the two of them returned to Bloodwing Academy. Ming Yufeng was a celebrity within Bloodwing. Nie Tian quickly inquired about his residence and went straight there. A moment later, Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu arrived at Bloodwing Academy's Martial Extreme Heaven. All of the Heaven Step courtyards were located here. When they arrived at the Azura Heaven courtyard, it was Ming Yufeng's residence. Ming Yufeng, get the hell out here. Nie Tianling stood outside the Azura Heaven. His deep roar exploded like a thunderclap, shaking the entire Martial Extreme Heaven. Rui Qinyu couldn't help but frown. She never imagined that Nie Tian would be so high-profile. After a moment, most of the martial artists in the Martial Extreme Heaven were alarmed. They all came out to see what was happening. But Ming Yufeng didn't appear, as if he weren't in the Azura Heaven. Who is this brat? Is he tired of living? He actually dares to challenge the Ming family's young master. I recognize him. I think he's the hidden dragon, Wu Kuei. I heard he killed the Ming family's adopted son, Yin Yanwen, several days ago. He killed Yin Yanwen, and now he's provoking Ming Yufeng. Just what background does this brat have that he can be so arrogant? Everyone looked at Nie Tian, all of them discussing. Ming Yufeng, didn't you want to kill me? Now that I'm here, you're acting like a turtle hiding in its shell. Nie Tian didn't care about anyone else. His eyes were low and murderous as he coldly roared. Insolence. Just as his voice fell, a voice rang out. A figure shot out like an arrow and landed on the ground. It wasn't Ming Yufeng, but another member of the Bloodwing Ninth Young Master, Qian Sun. You're called Qian Sun, right? Nie Tian looked at Qian Sun, his lips curling up in a cold smile. He said, I'm not looking for you. Tell Ming Yufeng to come out. Nie Tian, don't take a yard after taking an inch. Qian Sun was clearly surprised, but he soon calmed down. He coldly said, don't think that just because you're the hidden dragon Wu Kuei, we won't dare to kill you. Then tell Ming Yufeng to come out and sneak attack me again. Nie Tian's face darkened. His killing intent soared to the heavens. You're courting death. Qian Sun was enraged. He roared and his aura soared to the heavens. He didn't know why Nie Tian was still alive, but for him to be so arrogant now was absolutely courting death. But right at this moment, Qian Sun suddenly felt a terrifying power spreading over, making him feel a bone-piercing threat. He couldn't even stand straight. The look in his eyes changed, and he immediately locked onto Raindrop Thousand Leaves, his eyes filled with fear. The girl in front of him was clearly only at the first level of the heavenly tribulation realm. How could she release such terrifying power? Don't move. Rui Qinyu spoke calmly, but her words were extremely threatening. Qian Sun stood rooted to the ground, not daring to move at all. Chapter 42:39. In midair, Ming Yufeng stood as cold as a sword, his entire body surging with a fiery light. He was like a blazing ball of fire. Ming Yufeng. His appearance caused everyone to cry out in alarm, their gazes instantly converging on him. Ming Yufeng was extremely famous in Bloodwing Academy. His appearance naturally caused everyone to be filled with anticipation. More importantly, someone was openly provoking Ming Yufeng. A great show was about to begin. Ming Yufeng, you're finally willing to come out. Nie Tian looked at Ming Yufeng, not the slightest hint of fear in his eyes. On the contrary, his eyes were incomparably cold, and he could no longer suppress his killing intent. Nie Tian, I'm surprised you survived until now. Ming Yufeng clenched his teeth, his entire body radiating a similarly sinister killing intent. He was very curious as to why Nie Tian had survived after being struck by his nine-wolf extreme Yin curse. Moreover, Nie Tian's condition seemed to be completely fine. In fact, his aura was even stronger than before. It was truly strange. You think a trifling nine-wolf extreme Yin curse can take my life? You're underestimating me too much. Nie Tianling coldly replied. The sword intent within his body began to surge, circulating through his body like a slow stream, but releasing the momentum of a massive wave. Ming Yufeng's gaze trembled when he heard the nine-wolf extreme curse, panic filling his heart. How did Nye Tian know of the nine-wolf extreme curse? Had the fact that he cultivated the nine-wolf extreme curse been exposed? But how was that possible? Ming Yufeng pondered. The fact that he cultivated the nine-wolf extreme curse was only known to a few people close to him. There was no reason for it to be leaked. Are you afraid? Nye Tian caught all of Ming Yufeng's reactions. His lips curled into a sinister smile. Ming Yufeng, I know exactly what kind of trash you are and what you've done behind my back. Today, I'll tear apart your true face in front of everyone. The Ming family's young master. You're courting death. Ming Yufeng was completely enraged. He roared, and his aura exploded out like a landslide. His raging flames turned into a man-devouring flame beast that shot out at Nye Tian. Suddenly, the world was enveloped in flames, turning into a furnace purgatory. Tongues of fire were like long dragons, turning into terrifying killing intent in the air. Barrier. Nye Tianling stood in midair fearlessly. The corner of his lips twitched a little as he released his sword while in a frenzy, blocking the impact of the flames. Nye Tian, I only wanted you to die peacefully. But since you're so restless and want to die with a bang, I'll fulfill your wish. Ming Yufeng angrily roared. As his palm descended, endless flames gathered, forming a mountain-sized flame palm. It pressed down on Nye Tian. It was obvious that he did not want to be entangled with Nye Tian. He wanted to end the battle quickly and kill Nye Tian in one strike. Killing Nye Tian in a public place like this would have dire consequences. After all, Nye Tian was the hidden dragon martial leader. But Ming Yufeng couldn't care less. Nye Tian already knew his secret. He couldn't let him live. 8 cuts desolation. Facing this ferocious attack, Nye Tian was fearless. The sword in the sky pierced through the air. Its sword was like a raging wave, blocking the flame palm. Rumble. In the next moment, the void rumbled as the two forces collided, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. A terrifying shockwave spread out in all directions. Nye Tian's silhouette kept retreating. Glaring wounds appeared all over his body, all of them charred black. It was as if he'd been torn and burned by a flaming blade. Ming Yufeng, on the other hand, was as steady as a mountain, not moving an inch. But he was very surprised. He didn't think that Nye Tian, inside his blood pulse barrier, would be able to take his attack head-on. Remember, he was at the first level of Sky Awakening, a whole level higher than Nye Tian. Other than being the young master of the Ming clan, Ming Yufeng was also an extremely talented warrior. He'd even made it into the top 10 of the Hidden Sky list. Under such circumstances, he couldn't even kill a martial artist who was a major realm lower than him. It was truly a disgrace. Nye Tian stabilized himself. His body was already riddled with wounds, but the unswerving determination in his eyes didn't change in the slightest. Outside the barrier, everyone was shocked by the scene before them. This kid is too terrifying. He's only at the first level of Sky Awakening, but he can fight the young master of the Ming clan head-on. He's a monster. The young master of the Ming clan has activated the barrier, but he can't kill him in one strike. This Nye Tian is too scary. This person is worthy of his title as the hidden dragon martial leader. No wonder even Zhu Shi lost to him. The crowd discussed among themselves. Their focus had already shifted from Ming Yufeng to Nye Tian. Although Nye Tian was at an absolute disadvantage, everyone could see that his talent was far superior to Ming Yufeng's. If such a person grew up in the future, he would definitely become a peak powerhouse. Rui Qinyu watched from below. Her expression did not change much. She was not worried about Nye Tian at all, nor did she plan to intervene. This was Nye Tian's battle. She would not interfere. She knew that besides his terrifying battle strength, Nye Tian's martial body was even more terrifying. Nye Tian's martial body far surpassed warriors of the same level. It was even stronger than Ming Yufeng, who was a whole level higher. Nye Tian could take the same blow, but Ming Yufeng might not be able to. These injuries were nothing to Nye Tian. Bring it on. At this moment, Nietion's roar resounded from within the barrier. Although his body was covered in wounds, his aura did not weaken in the slightest. His eyes blazed with battle intent, and the sky sword in his hand was like a dragon waiting to strike. He wanted to tear everything apart, courting death. Ming Yufeng's eyes flashed with coldness. He controlled the flames within the barrier with both his hands. The flames were as red as blood, like the scorching sun in the middle of the sky. The surging flames condensed into a stream of lava, causing the air around it to flow, as though it was melting. Ordinary. Nietion frowned involuntarily as he felt the scorching heat gushing towards him. After which, he slashed out with his sword in the sky, soared as a gigantic sword formation appeared beneath his feet. This was none other than the 8 desolation flame of the proud sword art. At the same time, the astral soul flames surged, and the 6th limit of the sky's sword, Yang Annihilation, appeared once more. A terrifying sword shadow akin to a snake slashed through the air. Punk! A muffled sound rang out as the flames were forcibly dispersed by the sword shadow, scattering in all directions. MHM. Ming Yufeng's eyes widened. He exclaimed in shock. Not even in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Nietion would have such heaven-defying methods. Break! And at this moment, Nietion roared in a low voice, after which a muffled explosion resounded in the air as Ming Yufeng's bloodline barrier shattered. Pooh! Ming Yufeng's body trembled as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His countenance paled as he lifted his head to look at Nietion in fear. Nietion had actually broken his barrier? How was this possible? The astral soul flames, under the support of the 8 desolation flame, combined with Yang Annihilation's ultimate move, broke apart the barrier in a single move. Ever since the various energies within his body were devoured by the astral soul flames, Nietion's physical strength had weakened significantly. However, his control over his energy was much stronger than before. Earlier, when he used 3 different types of energy at the same time, not only did he not feel sluggish, he was able to smoothly complement each other, erupting with an astonishing might. If it was in the past, he wouldn't even have dared to dream of such a feat Fat Cat was right. In a short period of time, the fusion of the astral souls would cause him to lose some of his strength. But in the long run, it would be extremely beneficial. Chapter 4240. Nietion floated in midair like a cold sword, wreathed in a fierce sword intent. Eyes glittering with frigid light, he locked onto Ming Yufeng and said in a deep voice, "I know this isn't your true strength, Ming Yufeng. Let me see how powerful you are when you sneak attack me. Let me see just how strong your yin qi is. You're courting death." Ming Yufeng was infuriated by Nietion. With a roar, the aura of fire around him surged. It was as if he was bathing in a sea of fire. The 9 Wolfine art was his secret. He couldn't let outsiders know. Although most people wouldn't care about Nietion's arrogance, it was hard to guarantee that no one with ulterior motives would notice. As the young master of the Ming clan, if news of him cultivating the 9 Wolfine art spread, he would be in big trouble. At that time, not only him, but the Ming clan behind him and even the other aristocratic families would be affected. Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't use the 9 Wolfine art. The barrier has been broken. Do you think you can hurt me with this kind of power? Niet Tianling laughed. His sword intense soared into the sky. The star bloodline in his body surged. It was like a realm origin formation, turning his entire body into a giant formation. Boom! In the next instant, the sword intent broke through the flames and surged towards Ming Yufeng. The latter was forced back several hundred meters and almost couldn't stand. How is this possible? Ming Yufeng steadied himself. His eyes trembled in shock and disbelief. Nietion was only at the first level of the heavenly tribulation. How could he release such a terrifying aura? Everyone was also stunned by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled and their hearts were filled with shock. How can this guy be so strong? Is he really only at the first level of the heavenly tribulation? The young master of the Ming clan is a warrior on the hidden sky ranking, and he's an entire realm higher than that guy. How can he be suppressed? This person is too terrifying. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed that there could be such a strong person in this world. The crowd was shocked, and the focus was completely on Ye Tian. Ming Yufeng had been reduced to a supporting role. Ming Yufeng, are you still not going to bring out your true strength? Nye Tianling sneered, his eyes filled with disdain. Nye Tian, you've angered me. Ming Yufeng's gaze was filled with killing intent, and he roared. Flames surged around him, forming a giant totem in the air. The flames were like tens of thousands of snakes that roared and charged in all directions. Die! He let out a low roar, his eyes filled with killing intent. The totem in his palm caused the entire world to tumble. Nye Tian felt the pressure of the raging flames, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, the corners of his mouth twitched as he said playfully, "That's more like it." Boom! As the sound of his voice faded, a terrifying energy rushed out of his body. The fiend god inverse mark appeared on the corner of his eyes, and his aura became incomparably evil. After condensing his astral meridians, Nye Tian felt that his control over the energy in his body had become extremely easy. The energy flowed through his body without the slightest stagnation, and he could even activate his fiend god physique as he pleased. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. In the next instant, Nye Tian's sword soared through the air, and his sword intent erupted. The sword's shadow pierced through the void, breaking apart the flame totem and pressing down on Ming Yufeng. Bang! With a muffled sound, Ming Yufeng directly fell to the ground under the pressure of the giant sword. Waves of dirt soared into the sky, covering the sun. This horrifying scene caused everyone's expressions to turn sluggish as they turned to stone. Could it be that Ming Yufeng was killed by Nye Tian with a single sword strike? Just how strong was Nye Tian to be able to completely suppress Ming Yufeng? But at this moment, Nye Tianling was floating in the air, looking down at the turbid waves. His eyes flickered, as if he was waiting for something. He knew Ming Yufeng's strength, so he wasn't worried that Ming Yufeng would die just like that. The young master of the Ming clan is dead. Moments later, seeing that there was no movement from within the turbid waves, many people's expressions changed again as they exclaimed. However, before they could finish speaking, a strange scene occurred. On the ground, an eerie chi surged out, and a monstrous chi spread out like a dark cloud, engulfing the heavens and earth. What an evil chi! Instantly, everyone felt the cold and oppressive aura. Their eyes trembled as they involuntarily retreated. This kind of evil chi was far too terrifying. It was as if there were billions of flying ants in the air, wanting to devour people's bones and souls. Roar! Just as everyone was in a state of shock, a low growl resounded through the air. Following that, a black wolf soared into the sky. Its body was enormous, and in midair, it opened its jaws, revealing its sharp fangs. What is this thing? Everyone's eyes widened as they exclaimed in shock. It's revealed its true form. Looking at the huge wolf, a cold smile appeared at the corner of Nye Tian's mouth as he said, "So, this is your true face, Ming Yufeng." He had seen a similar scene from White Demon, so he wasn't surprised at all. Roar! The giant wolf roared once more. Inchi wildly surged around its body, like a giant wave in a dark sea. Its momentum was astonishing. In the next moment, the giant wolf moved. It swept through the air, fast to the extreme. Its claws fell down, pressing down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian's sword intent soared to the heavens. He slashed at the giant wolf. Shwa! 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 But the giant wolf's body was incomparably tough. It directly broke through the sword shadows, and its sharp claws slashed down, sending 3 beams of cold light towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He rapidly retreated, but he was a step too late. 3 deep gashes appeared on his shoulder, blood gushing out. Seeing this, the giant wolf's eyes turned even redder. Its massive body rolled forwards, pressing down on Lin Ming. Since he had already used the 9-wolf extreme art, there was no way he would allow Nye Tian to live. "Come at me." Nye Tian laughed, as he saw the giant wolf closing in. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back as he directly rushed over. "Has that fellow gone mad?" The crowd couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Many people were so scared that their faces turned white. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would actually rush towards a giant wolf? In wolf form, Ming Yufeng's body was extremely tough. Could it be that Nie Tian wanted to fight him head-on? That was simply too crazy. No one with any sense would do such a thing. Nie Tian's silhouette was extremely fast. Before the giant wolf could even react, he had already landed on its head. Outside his body, the yin qi was incomparably turbulent. It was like maggots in one's bones, wanting to seep into his body. The yin qi was extremely evil. If an ordinary cultivator were to come in contact with it, their life would be in danger. Chapter 42-41. High up in the sky, a fierce figure stood above the wolf's head, sword intent surging around him. Everyone's eyes trembled, completely shocked by the scene in front of them. Their terrified expressions seemed to be anticipating a bloody scene. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, Nie Tian's ruthless sword fell, directly piercing through the back of the wolf's head. Immediately, the wolf's skull cracked and blood and flesh flew everywhere. Under the immense pain, the wolf howled at the sky, its mournful cry piercing the heavens. "Die!" Nie Tian's entire body reeked of blood, but the killing intent in his eyes didn't dissipate at all. Instead, stimulated by the blood aura, it became even more intense. He let out a low roar and suddenly spun the long sword in his hand. Immediately, a burst of sword intent burst forth and pierced the back of the wolf's head. Immediately, sword intent burst forth and the back of the wolf's head exploded. Ming Yufeng, the young master of the Ming family, an influential figure of the Bloodwing Academy, couldn't even recover his human form before his death. Bathed in blood, Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. His entire person seemed sinister and terrifying. Everyone was completely shocked by the scene in front of them. They all sucked in a breath of cold air, their eyes trembling. They were speechless. Who would have thought that Ming Yufeng would die at Nie Tian's hands in such a manner? Following which, the extreme yin qi around the wolf's body dissipated. Its huge body crashed to the ground like a small mountain, stirring up a huge wave of dust. Nie Tian's figure landed, a dark red blood pill in his palm. It was the extreme yin blood pill Ming Yufeng had condensed. You killed young Master Feng? Only now did Qian Sun react. He looked at Nie Tian in fear, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "So what?" Nie Tian's lips curled in disdain as he asked coldly. "Nie Tian, you dare kill the young master of the Ming family in public? You're dead." Qian Sun's eyes were filled with rage and fear. Nie Tian only glanced at him, then turned and left. Boom! But right at this moment, a peerlessly violent and mighty force appeared high up in the sky. It roiled and tore through the sky, pressing down on the heavens and the earth as it smashed down towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's expression flickered as he sensed the dreadful pressure. Rui Qianyu, who was next to him, frowned. She took a step forward and was about to attack. Bang! However, almost at the same time, another wave of power appeared. It was like a mad dragon, extremely fast, directly blocking that wave of power. Everyone felt the pressure of the two forces clashing against each other, forcing them to retreat. Immediately, two silhouettes appeared high up in the sky. They were the two elders of the law enforcement department, Akira Rinchio and Huodantai. They were the ones who had unleashed the two forces just now. However, the difference was that one of them wanted to kill Nie Tian, while the other wanted to save Nie Tian. Huodantai. Akira Rinchio's eyes were filled with anger. He stared fixedly at Huodantai and roared in a low voice. Huodantai lowered his head to look at the giant wolf's corpse on the ground. He frowned and said, "Elder Ming, please calm down." "Calm down?" Akira Rinchio was enraged and roared. Nie Tian killed Ming Yufeng. He killed the Ming clan's young lord. And you want me to calm down? Huodantai frowned again and said, "The matter hasn't been investigated clearly yet, so it's best if we don't jump to conclusions." Niet Tian publicly tortured and killed Ming Yufeng, and so many people saw it. Is the matter still not clear enough? Akira Rinchio could not hide the anger in his heart and shouted, "Why are you protecting Niet Tian like this? Is it related to him in some way?" Huadongtai frowned again and said, "Elder Ming, I am only looking at the matter as it stands. You and I are both elders of the law enforcement department. If we rashly kill someone without investigating the matter clearly, wouldn't we lose the credibility of our law enforcement department?" Bullshit. The calmer Huadongtai was, the more enraged Akira Rinchio became. He directly cursed and shouted, "Niet Tian publicly killed a fellow student. According to the rules of the academy, he should be executed on the spot. Today, whoever dares to stop me, I will kill them." Boom! As his voice fell, his body exploded with an imposing aura that soared to the heavens. His heroic spirit intimidated everyone. Huadongtai's face darkened. He did not give in and directly said, "Akira Rinchio, with me here today, don't even think about touching Niet Tian. Huadongtai, you know who Ming Yufeng is, and you also know what his death means." Akira Rinchio's eyes were filled with killing intent as he said, "The price of protecting Niet Tian is not something you can bear." "Then let's try and see," Huadongtai coldly replied, not the slightest bit afraid. Akira Rinchio's eyes trembled, and his eyes were bloodshot. It was obvious that he was extremely angry, but he was afraid of Huadongtai's strength and did not dare to directly attack. At this time, Niet Tian suddenly opened his mouth and calmly said, "Elder Ming, I did not torture and kill Ming Yufeng. It was just that he violated the academy's rules. I came to arrest him, but he resisted, so I had no choice but to kill him." At this time, Niet Tian suddenly opened his mouth and calmly said, "Then tell me, what rules did Ming Yufeng violate?" Akira Rinchio suppressed the anger in his heart and coldly asked. "He cultivated the nine-wolf extreme tactic and brutally killed the academy's students. Venomous slander." Hearing Niet Tian's words, Akira Rinchio's face immediately darkened, and he coldly said, "Niet Tian, don't try to find an excuse for killing a fellow student. Even if you break the heavens today, you will not be able to escape death." Niet Tian frowned, disapproving. From Akira Rinchio's reaction, he should not have known that Ming Yufeng cultivated the nine-wolf extreme tactic, or else he would not have been so shocked. When the crowd heard Niet Tian's words, they immediately burst into an uproar. Ming Yufeng cultivated the nine-wolf extreme tactic? This can't be true, right? I heard that the nine-wolf extreme tactic is an extremely evil martial technique that requires the blood of virgins to cultivate. Ming Yufeng is the Ming clan's young master. He would not do such a thing, right? Ming Yufeng has many women by his side. Perhaps this really is a possibility. When Ming Yufeng fought with Niet Tian, he was forced to transform into a giant wolf, and his energy soared to the heavens. This is too strange. The Ming clan's bloodline shouldn't have such an evil aura, right? The crowd discussed and compared it to the giant wolf's corpse on the ground. They began to feel that Niet Tian's words were true. "Niet Tian, you killed young Master Feng and even slandered him for cultivating some extreme tactic. You're clearly framing him to get away with your crimes." At this time, Gonsun suddenly pointed at Niet Tian and shouted angrily, "Framing?" Niet Tianling laughed. "Gonsun, young Master Qian, since you're so close to Ming Yufeng, you should already know what kind of person he is. Knowing but not reporting and condoning murder is not a small crime. Later, Ming Yufeng's crimes will be confirmed. You won't be able to escape either." Gonsun's eyes trembled, and he was inexplicably shocked. He had actually been completely seen through by Niet Tian. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he could not say a word. What hidden dragon, Wu Kuei? Right at this moment, a low and deep voice suddenly sounded out from afar, and it was like muffled thunder that resounded in the ears of everyone. Not only is his natural talent extraordinary, he's even more shrewd, his methods are even more ruthless, and his disposition is even more treacherous. Chapter 42-42. High up in the sky, the black-clothed silhouette descended majestically. An oppressive force spread out, causing everyone's expressions to change. At this moment, the man's eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent as he stared fixedly at Nyetian with an incomparably sinister expression. This person's aura is so strong. Nyetian felt the murderous intent. He couldn't help but be shocked. With such an aura, that person's strength was definitely at the Sky Martial Arts Divine Ancestor level. Even if he hadn't reached the peak, he wasn't far from it. Head of the law enforcement department, everyone exclaimed when they saw the silhouette in the sky. Their eyes were shaking. The person who had come was the head of the law enforcement department, the person in charge of the law enforcement department, Ming Lishu. Ming Lishu also had another identity. He was a younger brother of the Ming family's leader, the second master of the Ming family, and Ming Yufeng's uncle. How could everyone not be shocked when he appeared? Greetings, head of the law enforcement department. Ming Rinqiu bowed and greeted Ming Lishu. Upon seeing this, Huadantai also nodded his head in acknowledgement. However, his expression was extremely ugly. He could still block one Min Rinqiu, but Ming Lishu was not someone Min Rinqiu could compare to. In the Ming family, this person was second only to the head of the Ming family, and he was also the chief enforcer. His status and power suppressed him quite a bit. Nyetian, do you have anything else to say? Ming Lishu did not pay attention to Ming Rinqiu and Huadantai, and instead directly asked with heavy killing intent. It was obvious that he was going to kill them. Ming Yufeng cultivated an evil technique and harmed his classmates. As a member of the law enforcement department, I was just doing my job. If the chief feels that what I did was inappropriate, then we can go to the dean and argue with him. Nyetian resisted the pressure and said it humbly. He knew that things had gotten out of hand. Xinguang Muxue should have known about it long ago. Moreover, he had people protecting him in secret. That person didn't show up. It was obvious that he was waiting for something. Whether or not Ming Yufeng cultivated an evil technique can't be determined by your words alone. But you killed him before everything was clear and everyone saw it. If I don't kill you today, I won't live up to my reputation as the chief enforcer. The killing intent in his eyes became denser and denser, and it seemed like it would burst out at any moment. However, he did not attack immediately, as if he was afraid of something. Or rather, he was waiting for something. How could he not know that Nyetian was using the Bloodwings Dean to pressure him? Once Xinguang Muxue really appeared, it would be impossible to kill Nyetian. Nyetian, more and more experts are gathering here. You should calm him down first. When the dean arrives, you'll be safe. In Nyetian's consciousness, the fat cat's voice rang out, reminding him. Nyetian nodded slightly. He calmly looked at Ming Lishu and said, Then may I ask, Lord Chief, if I did something wrong and you killed me without distinguishing between right and wrong, then what difference is there between you and me? Ming Lishu frowned, obviously not expecting Nyetian to ask such a question. With sharp tongue, Ming Lishu smiled faintly and said coldly, I am a chief enforcer. I can judge right and wrong clearly. Lord Chief, do you mean that the chief enforcer can kill as he pleases? Nyetian sneered and looked at him contemptuously. Ming Lishu's eyes twitched and his face suddenly darkened. He growled, Nyetian, die. As soon as he said these words, he moved. Immediately, endless power surged towards Nyetian, giving rise to a roaring sound. Nyetian's eyes trembled. He was puzzled. Ming Lishu was restraining himself just now. Why did he suddenly attack? In an instant, Nyetian was in a life-and-death situation. Ming Lishu was close to the peak of the Sky Martial Divine Ancestor Realm. One move was enough to kill a weaker Sky Martial Divine Ancestor Realm expert. No matter how powerful Nyetian was, he could not block such a fatal blow. At the moment of life and death, a figure suddenly appeared and exploded with a tremendous aura, resisting Ming Lishu. Bang! The next moment, there was a muffled sound in the air. Then, a figure flew out and landed on the ground, creating a 10-meter wide pit. Huadantai. Nyetian's expression changed. He saw that the figure was Huadantai. It was obvious that Huadongtai was no match for Ming Lishu. He couldn't even block one attack. Huadongtai struggled to stand up. His body was covered in blood and flesh. Huh. Up in the air, Ming Lishu frowned and his expression changed. He had never thought that Huadongtai would risk his life to save Nietian. If he had used any more force, Huadongtai would have been a corpse by now. Die. However, in the next second, Ming Lishu's expression darkened and he attacked again. Under his palm, the wind and clouds shook and the space shook. It was as if heaven and earth were tilting. Nietian immediately sensed the killing intent, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble with fear. He found it strange that the protector who had been hiding by his side hadn't shown up yet. Could it be that the protector was afraid of Ming Lishu and didn't dare to make a move? The protector that Shengwang Mushiwe assigned to protect Nietian was Yifeng. He was one of Shengwang Mushiwe's confidants. Other than when Nietian entered the life and death hunting ground, Yifeng had been hiding by Nietian's side. Right now, Yifeng hadn't made a move. It wasn't because he was afraid of Ming Lishu. It was because there were many powerful auras that had locked onto him. Ming Lishu didn't make a move just now because he was afraid of Yifeng. When the powerhouses of the Ming clan and the other clans showed up, he had no more concerns and made his move. Boom! The rolling palm, energy rolled up the wind and clouds and swallowed everything. It pressed down on Nietian. At that moment, a silhouette appeared. Her entire body was covered in blood-red light. Like a crimson sunset, she stood in front of Nietian. It was Rui Qinyu. Nietian's eyes flickered as he shouted, "Rain!" But it was too late. The powerful palm energy fell like a waterfall. Rui Qinyu was the first to bear the brunt of it. Her body trembled and countless wounds appeared on her body. Blood splattered like rain. Nietian stepped forward and released his aura in an attempt to block the violent force. However, his body trembled and he spat out blood. Whether it was him or Rui Qinyu, they were too weak in front of a powerhouse like Ming Lishu. They couldn't withstand a single blow. Nietian didn't care about anything else. He roared like a wild beast and hugged Rui Qinyu tightly. In the next moment, a strange scene appeared. The terrifying force suddenly retracted. It was as if it was suppressed by an even more terrifying force and started to collapse. Seeing this, Nietian forcefully opened his astral soul wings and retreated hastily. Then, before he could stabilize his body, the terrifying force in front of him dissipated, as if it was crushed by an invisible giant hand. Chapter 42-43. When Nietian saw that the person standing behind him was Liu, he couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't help but feel shocked. For a moment, he felt that the person standing behind him wasn't a person, but a bottomless abyss. It was as if he would fall into hell if he turned around to look at it. When he looked at Liu, especially the latter's eyes, which seemed calm, contained boundless killing intent. It was extremely frightening. Just this killing intent alone could shatter a powerhouse's heart in an instant. At this moment, Liu was too frightening. At the same time, Nietian faintly felt a dragon's roar reverberating within his body. In his mind, the image of the dragon shepherds appeared once again. The dragon shepherd's veins had already been devoured by the power of the stars and fused into the bloodline of the stars. However, it hadn't disappeared. It just existed in a different form. That instant reaction seemed to be some sort of predestined bond between the dragon shepherds and the demon tamer. It was extremely strange. At this moment, Nietian also had some sort of realization, or rather, some sort of faint worry. Perhaps Liu would become a formidable opponent in the future. Step back. Liu glanced at Nietian, clearly surprised. However, he quickly calmed down and said indifferently, "At this moment, there seemed to be an aura around him that was even greater than the heavens." Nietian regained his composure and nodded. He hugged the unconscious Rui Qinyu and retreated behind Liu. High up in the sky, Ming Lishu's expression was incomparably gloomy and cold. His fatal attack had been blocked. He couldn't help but feel puzzled when he saw an unfamiliar face standing below him. As the head of the law enforcement department, his strength could be ranked among the top in the entire Bloodwing Academy. Yet, this person before him had easily blocked his palm, and his aura was not any weaker than his own. However, he didn't recognize this person at all. This was too strange. Furthermore, Liyu's aura was too terrifying. It actually made him feel like his life was in danger. He never knew that there was such a person hidden within the academy. Could Liu be a mysterious powerhouse that Xinguang Muxue had secretly nurtured? Ming Yufeng deserved to die. The aura on his body was extremely yin qi. The reason he could transform into a wolf was because he cultivated the nine-wolf extreme yin art. Nie Tian killed him to get rid of a scourge for the academy, Liu said coldly. Her eyes were cold. Nonsense. Ming Lishu frowned and growled. Whether Ming Yufeng cultivates the nine-wolf extreme yin art or not isn't something you could decide with just a few words. If you still don't reveal your identity, don't blame this chief for being ruthless. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying flame rose from his body. The light of the flame set the prairie ablaze, breaking through the heavens and the earth, and spreading in all directions into a sea of fire. At this moment, Ming Lishu's Sky Martial Saint Ancestor aura was fully displayed. What a powerful aura! Everyone felt the scorching aura, and they all retreated in shock. However, Li was not afraid at all. His expression did not even change as he said, "My name is Li Yu. I'm a teacher in the academy, and I'm in charge of guarding the life and death hunting ground. Just now, in the hunting grounds of life and death, I caught an academy criminal from more than 30 years ago. A clone of Wolf Demon, White Demon." White Demon. Hearing this name, the crowd could not help but exclaim. Although the incident with White Demon had happened more than 30 years ago, because it was too bloody, it had caused quite a stir back then. So many people knew this name. Now that they heard about White Demon, how could they not be shocked? When Ming Lishu heard the name White Demon, he could not help but frown, and his expression changed. For the past 30 years, White Demon has not left the Bloodwings. He has been hiding in the life and death hunting ground. Liyu's eyes were dark as he said loudly, "Not long ago, Nie Tian and Zhu Shi entered the life and death hunting ground and killed White Demon. However, Zhu Shi was unfortunately hit by White Demon. He was hit by the latter's nine-wolf soul-stealing curse and is now in grave danger." Ming Lishu frowned and roared. "Liu, does what you said have anything to do with the matter in front of us?" He obviously did not want Liu to continue speaking. "Of course it does." Liu's face was cold as he said, "Before Nie Tian entered the life and death hunting ground, he was hit by Ming Yufeng's nine-wolf extreme yin curse and almost died. Zhu Shi's nine-wolf soul-stealing curse just so happens to need a martial artist who cultivates the nine-wolf extreme yin curse. Only the blood energy of a martial artist can save him." Enough. Ming Lishu's eyes were filled with rage as he roared. "You keep saying that Yufeng cultivates the nine-wolf extreme yin curse, but do you have any proof? How would I know that you did not collude with Nie Tian to slander Ming Yufeng?" "I think you know better than anyone what kind of trash Ming Yufeng is." Liyu's eyes darkened as he rebuked coldly. "What do you mean by that?" Ming Lishu's expression changed. He had not expected Liu to say such a thing. "Are my words not clear enough?" Liyu's lips curled into a Ming smile as he said coldly, "Does your Ming family not know that Ming Yufeng cultivates the nine-wolf extreme yin curse?" As he finished speaking, he turned around and signaled for Nie Tian to leave with him. "Want to leave?" Ming Lishu's anger soared to the heavens as he roared, "None of you can leave today." Liyu's body froze for a moment before he suddenly turned around. His eyes were incomparably cold as he glared at Ming Lishu. "I don't want to embarrass you. You better not stop me. You're courting death." Ming Lishu's heart couldn't help but tremble when he sensed the terrifying aura in Liyu's eyes. However, he immediately let out a roar, and his silhouette moved in an instant. Monstrous flames rose up into the sky, causing waves of heat to billow out, blotting out the sky and covering the earth as he headed straight for Liu. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as his heart filled with shock. He was very worried about whether Liu had the strength to fight against Ming Li Shu. As a demon tamer, Li Yu's talent was naturally outstanding. However, he was still young, and his realm was definitely not as high as Ming Li Shu's. Boom! At this moment, Li Yu took a step forward as his aura instantly surged to the limit. A terrifying strength, accompanied by a towering battle intent, gushed forth. After which, a dragon-like spear of darkness appeared in his hand. In an instant, it was pitch black. Instantly, a boundless aura spread out, engulfing the earth and piercing through everything. Asterisk, rumble, 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 asterisk, high up in the sky. The two powers collided. Heaven and earth trembled and rumbled. The crowd retreated once again as they looked at the shocking scene in astonishment. Nie Tian brought Rui Qianyu and retreated 10,000 meters away. He looked at Li Yu below in astonishment. He felt as if there was a demon god within Li Yu's body. The surging power simply wanted to devour everything. If he wasn't mistaken, Li Yu's cultivation should be around the 5th level of the Heaven Realm. He was far inferior to Ming Li Shu, who was in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. The Heaven Realm was the pinnacle of the 6 levels of Saint. The difference between each level was equivalent to the difference between the previous level and the previous level. Li Yu, with his cultivation of the 5th level of the Heaven Realm, was able to fight against Ming Li Shu, who was in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. One could well imagine how powerful his talent and fighting strength was. Chapter 42-44. There were 3 great prophecies of the great void of the dragon tribe: the dragon rebel lord, the dragon shepherds, and the demon controller. The dragon rebel lord represented hope, the dragon shepherds represented rebirth, and the demon controller represented destruction. Among the 3 great prophecies, the demon controller was the most powerful existence. He was extremely talented and powerful. He was an invincible saint. That was why demon tamers could represent destruction, subversion, death, and darkness. When Yi Yao realized that Li Yu was the demon master, he was shocked beyond words. However, there were many things that he didn't tell Nie Tian. He knew that Nie Tian, Li Yu, and Ni Jiaming were the people in the Great Void Prophecy, so they must be carrying some kind of mission. Since the demon taming was destruction and the dragon shepherds were rebirth, when the two met, perhaps there would be some unexpected changes in their destinies. Nie Tian retreated to the sky, far away. He was shocked when he sensed the endless dark and terrifying aura from Li Yu. The meridian of dragon shepherds in his body seemed to be stimulated and sensed something. It was restless and almost went out of control. Who is this guy? How can he have such terrifying power? Everyone was trembling as they watched the terrifying scene in shock. As the chief law enforcement officer, Ming Li Shu should be powerful. But Li Yu was just a nobody. How would he fight Ming Li Shu head-on? Bang! While everyone was still in shock, a muffled sound came from the sky. Then, a figure flew out from the towering fire waves, leaving a trail of blood in the air. The crowd was shocked when they saw that. Then, they were shocked when they saw the figure clearly. It was Ming Li Shu. How is this possible? Everyone's first reaction was disbelief. Many people's eyes were wide open, and they were speechless. A powerful cultivator like Ming Li Shu had been defeated by Li Yu. It was too shocking. After a while, the turbid waves in the sky dissipated. Li Yu was like a giant holding a long spear. His eyes were glowing with a cold and evil light. Ming Li Shu was standing in the sky. There were several bloody wounds on his body, and he looked like a mess. He looked at Li Yu with fear in his eyes. "Who exactly are you?" Ming Li Shu asked in shock, but his throat was rolling, and he was doing his best to suppress the blood that was about to come out. He was defeated. He was defeated by a nobody. Moreover, he was defeated in one move. He could only swallow this humiliation with tears in his eyes. However, he was the chief law enforcement officer after all. He had to protect his remaining dignity. Even if he was defeated, he had to maintain his dignity. Li Yu, the guardian of the life and death hunting ground, Li Yu replied coldly. However, every word he uttered gave off a feeling of killing intent. "Li Yu, I will remember this name." Ming Li Shu spoke in a low voice, but his body trembled while a mouthful of blood surged, yet he forcefully swallowed it back before he spat it out. Li Yu's eyes narrowed slightly. She had already seen through everything and said, "If you don't want to die, it's best if you don't speak anymore." You pfft. Ming Li Shu's eyes trembled, and his body trembled again. In the end, he could not even protect his last bit of dignity. A mouthful of dirty blood spurted out, and his face became as pale as a sheet. Li Yu's face was cold and emotionless. She merely frowned slightly, then turned around and said to Nietan, "Let's go." "Yes." Nietan nodded heavily. Rui Qinyu's injuries were not light, and they had to be treated as soon as possible. However, just as the two of them turned around and were about to leave, several terrifying auras rose from the surroundings. Suddenly, an enormous and oppressive aura descended, like a majestic wave that rolled from all directions. Li Yu frowned and took a step forward. A monstrous aura was released, and it resisted the waves. Tian placed Rui Qinyu into the 9 superbs, then moved and hid behind Li Yu. Under the enormous pressure, the crowd retreated again. Many people looked at the sky in shock, not knowing what was going on. "Young man, what an imposing manner." Just then, a deep voice rang out with a hint of playfulness. "Since you're here, why don't you show yourself?" Li Yu's gaze turned cold. The spear in his hand, the 9th Heaven Imperial Devil, was pointed at the sky. Suddenly, a heaven-devouring aura erupted, forcibly dispersing the pressure in the surrounding space. After the surge, a gray-robed figure appeared. He stood tall and had the bearing of a grandmaster. However, his eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared fixedly at Li Yu. Li Yu was not the least bit afraid. He stared straight at the person as if he was provoking him. Who would have thought that the Angel Clan would have someone like that hidden away? The man said coldly, "Looks like my trip to the Bloodwing clan was not in vain." The man's mouth twitched, and the killing intent in his eyes grew even stronger. The Ming clan's master, Minister Ming, is indeed a top expert of the Angel Clan. Li Yu's eyes flickered as he responded in a deep voice. The Ming clan's master. The crowd's eyes trembled when they heard Li Yu's words. No one had expected that the person who had come was the Ming clan's master. The Ming clan's master was Ming Yufeng's father. It seemed that things had really gotten out of hand this time. Tian stared at Minister Ming. His eyes darkened as he was shocked. Although Minister Ming was the Ming clan's master, he was still young and in the prime of his life. His aura was no weaker than the elders of the Angel Clan. It was really shocking. Previously in the City of Angels, Tian had thought that the Angel Clan's top fighting force was the clan's master, a few patriarchs, and a few elders. It seemed that he had guessed wrong. Apart from a main faction, the Angel Clan had many powerful branches. They were no weaker than the main faction. It was no wonder that even the Dean, Shengguang Muxue, had to be restrained by the Ming clan and the other aristocratic families. I have been in seclusion for many years. I never thought that someone would still recognize me. Minister Ming spoke calmly, but he could not hide the anger in his heart. "Master Ming, others may not recognize you, but I can recognize you even if you turn into ashes." Li Yu's eyes suddenly flickered as he said in a deep voice, "Back then, I saw you force my master to death with my own eyes." Minister Ming frowned. Then, he thought of something and said with a smile, "I remember now. You are the child who followed Li Xing. You finally remember." Li Yu's lips curled into a cold smile. "Back then, my master, Li Xing, was the chief enforcer. He was upright and plain-spoken, and he hated evil. Your 4th brother, Ming Yuan Shu, was tyrannical in the academy and killed the innocent. Teacher was right. He tolerated it again and again, but he pressured him again and again. In the end, Teacher personally executed him. And your eldest brother, in order to take revenge, led the powerhouses of the aristocratic families to threaten the academy. In order not to implicate the academy, Teacher chose to end his own life. I will never forget that scene." Chapter 42-45. An eye for an eye. Li Yu's aura erupted like a flash flood. His towering anger and hatred transformed into a terrifying fighting spirit. The power within his body was stimulated to the extreme. So strong, Nie Tian was shocked when he sensed the terrifying impact coming at him. Li Yu's aura had increased by several times. It had reached a terrifying level. It was hard to imagine that a cultivator in the 5th level of the Tianqi realm could release such an aura. Nie Tian had seen many peak experts, such as the 5 Deans. Li Yu's aura wasn't any weaker than theirs. Li Yu was worthy of his title as a demon tamer. The crowd was pushed back again by the aura. Many people looked at Li Yu in fear. They were shocked beyond words. No one had expected Li Yu to challenge Minister Ming. Minister Ming was an expert who had been famous for a long time. His cultivation was much higher than Li Yu's. Li Yu had a good reason to erupt. When he had come to the Bloodwing Academy, he had been a child. His teacher, Li Xing, had raised him. To him, Li Xing was his teacher and his father. Back then, he had watched as Li Xing was killed by the aristocratic families. The anger in his heart had burned like a flame. He had almost gone insane. But at that time, he was too weak. He could only watch, unable to do anything else. He had endured for so many years just so that one day he could kill his enemy and offer a blood sacrifice to his teacher. Now, the person who had killed his teacher was right in front of him. How could he endure this? Li Yu, I'll let you go back then because I was soft-hearted. I didn't expect you to become the root of a disaster today. Minister Ming smiled indifferently at Li Yu's coercion. He said, but that's fine. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. He took a step forward. In an instant, a raging flame engulfed the entire sky. The scarlet flame was like a burning cloud in the sky. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the two auras collided. Although Li Yu was powerful, he was still suppressed by Minister Ming. Li Yu's body sank a little as his feet sank 3 inches into the ground. However, his eyes were extremely sharp and filled with cold, killing intent. Come, let me see how strong your desire for vengeance is. Minister Ming laughed coldly. The flames around him surged and condensed into streams of molten lava. Like a giant snake, it pounced ferociously towards Li Yu. Li Yu's eyes darkened. The 9 heavens imperial demon spear pierced through the heavens. The spear's will penetrated and the darkness was boundless, blocking most of the lava. However, some of it still fell and smashed onto the shield around his body. The lava was incomparably scorching, and its burning power was extremely strong. Even though Li Yu had a protective barrier, he was still burned. His entire body was in searing pain. Kill! But he was not afraid at all. With a roar, he rose from the ground and pointed his spear at Minister Ming. Just in time, Minister Ming smiled coldly. He formed a seal with both hands, and a strange flame totem appeared in front of him, pressing down on Li Yu. Bang! In the air, a spear shadow rushed out, but it was blocked by the flame totem. Immediately after, the flame totem released numerous flame shackles. Like long snakes, the shackles slithered down at an astonishing speed, enveloping Li Yu. Li was in the air. Obviously, he did not expect this to happen. He was surprised and wanted to react, but it was too late. He was too impulsive and underestimated Minister Ming's strength. Oh no! Nie Tian's eyes trembled and his heart sank. Li was already at a disadvantage. Once Minister Ming suppressed him, he would be in danger of dying. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. At this critical moment, a giant hand suddenly appeared in the air and directly fell down, crushing the flame shackles. Minister Ming's expression changed. He raised his head to look into the sky. Where his gaze landed, there was a white-robed figure standing tall and majestic like a mountain. Holy light shone brightly. Dean! Nie Tian looked at the figure in white and immediately recognized that the latter was Shengguang Muxue, the Dean of the Bloodwing. He could not help but feel happy. Nie Tian immediately felt relieved when Shengguang Muxue arrived. Things had already gotten out of hand. If Shengguang Muxue still did not appear, the situation might completely spiral out of control. Minister Ming frowned and looked gloomily at Shengguang Muxue. Dean, Shengguang Muxue said indifferently, his face cold. Dean, what happened in the Bloodwing Academy should be resolved in the Academy. You aristocratic families should not interfere. My son died for no reason. As his father, shouldn't I seek justice for him? Minister Ming sneered. Even in front of Shengguang Muxue, he did not restrain himself in the slightest. He was very arrogant. Shengguang Muxue frowned and said coldly, Ming Yufeng's matter will be handled by the academy. There is no need for you to worry. Is that so? Minister Ming sneered again. He raised his eyebrows and said, What if I must interfere? Ming family head, this dean will naturally investigate Ming Yufeng's matter and give him justice. Please do not be overbearing and push things to the extreme, Shengguang Muxue said coldly, anger in his eyes. Humph, humph. Minister Ming laughed sinisterly. He said in a loud voice, Lord Dean, do you think right or wrong is important at this time? I'm afraid you cannot give me justice. What kind of justice does Ming family head want? Shengguang Muxue asked gravely, suppressing his anger. Of course, he understood that at this moment, the so-called right and wrong was no longer important. What was important was whose fist was stronger. In this world where the martial way was revered, there was a wise saying, reason is a bitch. Always stand on the side with the bigger fist. The truest way to survive. Weakness is wrong. Shengguang Muxue had not expected things to go to the extreme so quickly. In the beginning, he had used Nie Tian to suppress the aristocratic families in exchange. But Nie Tian's speed had far exceeded his expectations and caught him off guard. But now that things had come to this, it would be inexcusable for him, the dean, to hide his head and not show his face. Moreover, he knew that Nie Tian's identity was special. Nothing could happen to him. I want everyone related to my son's death to be buried with him. Minister Ming's gaze turned vicious. He stared at Shengguang Muxue like a wolf and said coldly, Shengguang Muxue frowned and his expression darkened. He had not expected Minister Ming to be so overbearing. According to him, Nie Tian was the one who deserved to die the most. The others, such as Yu Shi, Su Yu, and even Lai Yin and Huang Ling, should all die. Shengguang Muxue knew that he had to protect Nie Tian, even if he had to fall out with the aristocratic families. Seeing that Shengguang Muxue was silent, Minister Ming twitched the corner of his mouth and asked provocatively, Dean, can you give me justice? Shengguang Muxue was silent for a while. Then, he said in a clear voice, I was there when Li Xing died. I saw the whole process with my own eyes. Unfortunately, I wasn't the dean at that time. Senior Li Xing chose to commit suicide to avoid the conflict between the academy and the aristocratic families. I deeply respect his courage and righteousness for committing suicide, but I don't agree with his way of doing things. If I had been the dean, I would not have let anyone force the chief law enforcer of the academy to commit suicide. Back then, I didn't have the chance to resist on behalf of the Bloodwings Academy. Chapter 42-46. Resist to the end. Every word of Shengguang Muxue's was resounding, displaying his great determination. Since he was already the dean, then the tragedy of the past could not be played out in his hands. Resist to the end. Resist to the end. Resist to the end. As soon as he spoke, the entire crowd erupted into a tsunami of shouts. Everyone present was united against a common enemy, their morale shaking the heavens. The great aristocratic families were very powerful. They had deep roots in the Bloodwing Academy, controlling much of the Academy's authority. It was precisely because of this that the scions of these aristocratic families were all arrogant and despotic, committing all sorts of crimes. They only relied on the powers behind them. They felt that even if they made mistakes, the Academy would not dare to do anything to them. Many of the Academy's students had been bullied and humiliated by the scions of the aristocratic families. Now that the dean had personally stepped forward and set an example, how could they not support him? Nie Tian's gaze swept over the crowd before him. He could not help but frown, thinking to himself, it seems that this matter is going to get out of hand. Oh, Ming Shanshu was not the least bit afraid of this situation. On the contrary, he smiled cold and glanced at Shengguang Muxue. Lord Dean, are you declaring war on our aristocratic families? This dean has never been willing to become enemies with the various aristocratic families. All I hope for is that the Academy's affairs will not be interfered with by any other power. Xinguang Mushue's gaze was heavy. My Bloodwing Academy does not wish to declare war, but does not fear war. If there are people who harbor ill intentions and attempt to overthrow the Bloodwing Academy, as the Dean, I will fight to the death to protect the Bloodwing Academy. Fight to the death to protect the Bloodwing Academy. The resounding voice was followed by thunderous shouts from the crowd. Fight to the death to protect the Bloodwing Academy. Ming Xiangshu smiled coldly, looking provocatively at Xinguang Muxue. Lord Dean, I believe you've been preparing for this moment for a long time. Xinguang Muxue frowned. He said gravely, Patriarch Ming, you and I are both members of the Angel Clan. Fighting against our own clansmen is something this Dean does not wish to see the most. I hope Master Ming will not take the most wrong step. Minister Ming's gaze shifted and his face was fierce. He stepped forward and said coldly, What if I must take this step? Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura appeared in the surroundings of the Bloodwing Academy, soaring into the sky. Like a dense dark cloud, the aura actually surrounded the entire Bloodwing Academy in an instant. Xinguang Muxue could feel the terrifying pressure coming from all directions. He couldn't help but frown, and his face darkened. He had not thought that Minister Ming's stance would be so unyielding. These experts had obviously been at the Bloodwing for a long time and were waiting for Minister Ming's orders. Furthermore, it was impossible for a single Ming clan to have so many experts. The other aristocratic families had also come. Headmaster, since I've come, I can't return empty-handed. Minister Ming was enjoying the look of shock on Xinguang Mushue's face. He smiled faintly and said, Therefore, I have brought some friends with me this time. The headmaster should not mind. Let's go. At this moment, Xinguang Muxue sensed that something was wrong. His expression changed, and he growled, Minister Ming, just what are you planning? If Minister Ming had only come from Ming Yufeng's death, he wouldn't have mobilized such a large force. Moreover, Ming Yufeng had only been killed recently. No matter how fast the news spread, it couldn't have instantly spread to so many aristocratic families. Although Ming Yufeng was the young master of a famous family, his death didn't have such a great impact that it would attract so many aristocratic families. Therefore, the only explanation was that Minister Ming and the various aristocratic families had been planning this for a long time. Ming Yufeng's death was just a coincidence. It had become the fuse for this incident. My son died mysteriously in the Bloodwing Academy. This means that a huge problem has appeared in the academy. Minister Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. This headmaster feels that you have controlled the Bloodwing Academy for too long. It is time for the Bloodwing Academy to change its name. It is time for the name to change. You're rebelling. Although Xinguang Muxue had guessed this, hearing it from Minister Ming's mouth still shocked him. Bloodwing Academy was one of the 5 great academies of the sacred world. Behind it was the Angel Clan, and it also had extremely close ties with the other 4 academies. Apart from a main faction, the Angel Clan also had various branch factions. The Emperor, Angel Xinguang Yu, the 9 Great Elders, and the 4 ancestors represented the main faction of the Angel Clan. As for the Ming family, the Qian family, the Hua family, and the other aristocratic families, they represented the branch factions of the Angel Clan. One was the main faction, and the other the branch factions. Originally, there had been a difference in the main faction, each doing their own thing. But in the recent hundreds of thousands of years, the branch factions of the Angel Clan had grown stronger and stronger, and they had begun to have the strength to contend against the main faction. As a result, the conflict between the main faction and the branch factions had grown greater and greater. The matter of Li Xingbak then had happened precisely after this conflict had reached a certain level. Back then, Bloodwing Academy and the Angel Clan had come to a compromise in order to prevent the matter from escalating and causing bloodshed within the clan. They had tacitly agreed to Li Xing's sacrifice. The original attempt to keep the peace did not bring true peace. Instead, the conflict between the main faction and the branch factions grew more and more intense. At the same time, the branch factions grew more and more difficult to control. Minister Ming said, that Bloodwing Academy should change its name. This was undoubtedly a declaration of war against Bloodwing and the branch factions, rebelling. Minister Ming chuckled. Since ancient times, power has always been in the hands of the strong. Even the City of Angels has been destroyed in the hands of people like you. Are you still worthy of representing the Angel Clan? You already know. Shengguang Muxue frowned in surprise. The news of the City of Angels being destroyed by the Qi Demon God was originally supposed to be kept under wraps to prevent the Angel Clan from being shaken. He never thought it would still spread. However, there was no way to keep this matter under wraps. After all, it was just too big. Can you hide it? Minister Ming sneered. You can't even protect the holy City of Angels. You still want to be the emperor in peace. Dream on, you. Shengguang Mushue's eyes darkened. His chest heaved violently. He was furious. He had never imagined that these aristocratic families would be so ambitious. They actually coveted the position of emperor. The emperor of the Angel Clan had always been inherited by the main Angel Clans. There had never been a branch Angel Emperor. Even the Great Elder rarely came from the branch Angel Clans. It seemed that Minister Ming and the others had been planning this for a long time. The destruction of the City of Angels gave them ample reason to stage this scene. Shengguang Muxue, I'll give you a chance right now. As long as you're willing to join us and hand over the Bloodwing Academy, you'll be able to retain your position as an elder once the new angel tribe is formed, Minister Ming said with a frown. Chapter 42-47. Shengguang Mushue's face was gloomy, and a terrifying aura surged around him. He was like a volcano that could erupt at any time. He had never expected that the Ming family would ally with the other aristocratic families and attempt to annex the main family. Yet, Minister Ming wanted to rope him in, which was an insult to him. Sir Dean, you're so angry. Minister Ming's face was gloomy, and he said in a cold tone, I don't think you understand the situation. Look around. If you do not agree to this patriarch's request, then today, the Bloodwing Academy will face a calamity of destruction. And you, the Dean, will become the center of the Bloodwing Academy. Shengguang Mushue's face was cold and murderous. He glanced at the experts around him. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. He suddenly smiled and said loudly, What a sinner! If I agree with you today, I will be the center of the Bloodwing Academy. Where is he? Ming Shangshu's eyes were full of murderous intent. He said in a deep voice, In that case, don't blame me for being merciless. Do it. Yes. As the sound of his last word faded, the experts from the various aristocratic clans who had been accumulating their strength all around replied in unison. After which, a terrifying aura gushed forth from them, rumbling down from the skies, akin to the night devouring the day. Dean, seeing that Shengguang Muxue was about to be overwhelmed, the martial artists of the Bloodwing Academy exclaimed. Many people gathered their auras and prepared to rush over. As the dean of the Bloodwing Academy, Shengguang Mushue's strength was close to the peak. However, facing so many sky martial artists at the same time, even he couldn't bear it. Everyone, step back. Without my order, no one is allowed to come close. At this moment, Shengguang Mushue's voice suddenly rang out, falling in everyone's ears like thunder. Then, everyone saw a figure soar into the sky. 9 pairs of angel wings unfolded on his back, and he resisted the pressure with holy light. Shengguang Muxue wanted to break through the pressure, but the terrifying pressure around him made him feel like he was entangled by thousands of iron chains. He couldn't break free at all. After all, he was facing over 100 sky martial divine ancestors, and some of them were not weaker than him. Even with his 9 wings spread out, he could only barely resist and could not hold on for too long. Shengguang Muxue. Minister Ming stood high up in the sky, his aura billowing. He stared coldly at Shengguang Muxue and sneered. Your strength is not bad, but it is a pity that you are against me. You are destined to die here. Shengguang Muxue raised his head with difficulty. The anger in his eyes was like an invisible hand that locked onto Minister Ming. The corners of his mouth twitched. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Instead, blood flowed out. This is your last chance. Are you willing to submit? At this moment, Minister Ming realized that Shengguang Muxue couldn't hold on any longer. He roared with a playful look in his eyes. No! Shengguang Muxue spat out a mouthful of blood and roared furiously. He was like a beast trapped in a cage, violent yet powerless. You have guts. Minister Ming smiled coldly and released his murderous intent. He shouted, I will fulfill your wish. As soon as he said those words, he swept his gaze across the crowd, and an even more terrifying aura burst forth from him. Thunderous rumbles echoed in the air as it bore down on Shengguang Muxue. Bring it on. Shengguang Muxue's eyes were filled with determination. He did not show any signs of fear. Instead, he let out a hearty laugh. He would die for the greater good. He would die for the greater good. He would die with no regrets. Dean! At this moment, a low roar was heard. Then, a figure shot into the sky like a mad dragon and forcefully dispersed part of the pressure. Minister Ming's eyes narrowed. When he saw the figure clearly, his lips curled into a cold smile. The person who had charged out was none other than Li Yu. Since Li Yu wanted to take revenge on him, he might as well kill her as well and put an end to all troubles. However, Li Yu's speed was unbelievably fast and his strength was shocking. He managed to break through the wall of pressure. This is my chance, Shengguang Muxue exclaimed in surprise. Although he was prepared to sacrifice himself, if he could survive, he would fight for it. Li Yu's sudden attack was a good opportunity for him. In the blink of an eye, the 9 pairs of wings on Shengguang Muxue's back flapped. A powerful force spread out and loosened the tightened space around him. A slight loosening meant a chance of survival. Shengguang Muxue's wings flapped again, and he dashed out. At the last moment, he managed to escape from the claws of death. Bang! Bang! However, the two of them were still affected by the remaining force of the pressure. 2 muffled sounds could be heard in the air. It was as if they had been hit by an invisible giant hand. They were thrown thousands of meters away before they managed to stabilize themselves. Are you all right? Shengguang Muxue's body was covered with wounds. However, Li Yu, who was next to him, was more injured than him. He could not help but worry. I'm fine, Li Yu replied in a low voice. His eyes were fixed on Minister Ming, and they flashed with a cold light like that of a ferocious beast. Shengguang Muxue looked at him for a long time before he finally remembered who he was. You actually escaped. Interesting. At that moment, Minister Ming looked at Li Yu and Shengguang Muxue with a sinister smile. Of course, he could tell that although Li Yu and Shengguang Muxue were not dead, they were severely injured and were not far from death. Minister Ming, I'll make a bet with you. Do you dare to accept? Li Yu's eyes darkened as he growled. Bet? What bet? Minister Ming's lips twitched, and he smiled coldly. In reality, the situation was already under his control. There was no need for him to bet with Li Yu. However, he wanted to know what Li Yu wanted to say. You and I will fight. If you lose, I'll kill you. If I lose, the blood wings will be yours. Li Yu's eyes flashed coldly as he spoke loudly. Oh! Minister Ming's eyes trembled. He smiled and said, Li Yu, what status do you have in the blood wings? How much weight do your words carry? Li Yu's eyes darkened as he looked at Shengguang Muxue and said, Dean, this is the blood wings' only chance. Shengguang Muxue's eyes trembled. Clearly, Li Yu wanted him to open his mouth and make the bet effective. He looked at Li Yu. In his eyes, he didn't feel a request, but a threat. That's right. He could sense that Li Yu was threatening him. However, as Li Yu had said, this was the blood wings' only chance. He could fight to the end, but the result would be a bloodbath. However, this bet was a little too big. If he lost, he would lose the entire Blood Wings Academy. Clearly, Minister Ming didn't want to be too forceful. He didn't want the aristocratic families to waste too much of their power on the Blood Wings Academy. Their true enemy was the main angel faction. Li Yu was only in the 5th level of the Heaven Realm. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be a match for Minister Ming. Furthermore, he was heavily injured. Judging by his appearance, it was unknown whether or not he would be able to survive. Under such circumstances, wasn't fighting Minister Ming the same as courting death? Chapter 42-48. Shengguang Muxue raised his head and saw that the person standing in front of him was Tian. His eyes narrowed. He knew that Tian was a heavenly level expert and also knew the status of a heavenly level expert in the Angel clan. However, the matter at hand was related to the life and death of the Bloodwing Academy and his life's honor. He couldn't make a decision easily. Shengguang Muxue didn't know Li Yu's identity, but he remembered that the person who brought Li Yu to the Bloodwing Academy was the current Angel Emperor, Shengguang Huaiyu. He guessed that Li Yu and Shengguang Huaiyu must have a very close relationship. He hadn't paid attention to Li Yu for so many years. It was only today that he realized that this mysterious young warrior had such terrifying strength. Judging from the potential that Li Yu had shown, when he reached the 9th tier of the Sky Martial Realm, even the Angel Emperor wouldn't be his match. But now his cultivation was too low and he was seriously injured. How could he fight Ming Shangshu? He'll definitely win. I won't lose. While Shengguang Muxue was still hesitating, Niet Tian and Li Yu spoke at the same time. Shengguang Muxue felt the determination and confidence in their eyes and couldn't help but tremble. Okay. After a moment of silence, Shengguang Muxue finally nodded. He looked at Ming Shangshu and said, Ming Shangshu, tell the others to leave. Li Yu will represent the Bloodwing Academy and have a fair fight with you. If you win, the Bloodwing Academy will change its name and belong to an aristocratic family. If you lose, I don't need to tell you what will happen. You know very well what will happen. Very good. Ming Shangshu's eyes flickered. He didn't expect Shengguang Muxue to agree. However, it wasn't strange. Shengguang Muxue had no other choice under the current circumstances. I have another condition. Right at that moment, Li Yu suddenly spoke. She said loudly, I need a helper. A helper? Ming Shangshu sneered. He suddenly looked at Niet Tian and said disdainfully, Who? Him? The most important thing in a battle between two people was to be fair, but Li Yu wanted to help, which was wrong in itself. Minister Ming could have refused directly, but he wanted to see what Li Yu was up to. That's him. Unexpectedly, Li Yu nodded. She pointed at Niet Tian and said, He killed your son. Don't you want revenge? I will join forces with him to fight you. Do you dare to accept? Aha! Minister Ming was stunned at first, and then he couldn't help but laugh wildly. He was just joking earlier. He did not expect that Li Yu would actually want Niet Tian to be her helper. Niet Tian was just a heavenly tribulation Saint King martial artist. In the eyes of Sky martial realm experts, he was simply an ant not worth mentioning. However, Li Yu wanted Niet Tian to be her helper. Wasn't she asking for a burden? Li Yu, are you crazy? Shengguang Muxue was stunned for a moment, and then he shouted in a low voice. Niet Tian's identity was extraordinary. He could not let anything happen to him, but Li Yu wanted him to fight with Ming Shangshu. It was obvious that she wanted to drag him down with her, even if she had to die. However, at this time, Niet Tian looked at Shengguang Muxue calmly and nodded. Dean, I am willing to fight with Brother Li. Shengguang Muxue's eyes narrowed. He was speechless. He thought that Li Yu was crazy, but he did not expect that Niet Tian was even crazier. He was obviously courting death. Couldn't he see that? Well, kill one, get one free deal. How can I refuse? At this time, Minister Ming said with a cold smile, I was going to kill him anyway. This will save me a lot of trouble. In this way, you will have a companion on your way to the netherworld. After that, he waved his hand, and the experts of the major families stepped back. The world regained some clarity. Li Yu became solemn. He glanced at Niet Tian and then soared into the sky. The corners of Niet Tian's mouth twitched slightly as he followed after him. The two of them stood in the sky, one after the other. Long time no see, Dragon Shepherd. Niet Tian stared at Minister Ming, feeling uncertain, until he heard Li Yu's voice in his mind, which made him change his expression. He didn't expect that Li Yu would know that he was Dragon Shepherd. Do you think that I don't know who I am? Li Yu's voice rang out again with a mysterious smile. Hide behind me later. When I need your power, I'll tell you. Okay. Niet Tian held back his shock and nodded solemnly. It was obvious that Li Yu knew much more than he had thought. He was very curious about how much Li Yu knew about the 3 prophecies and if he knew anything about his own mission. However, that wasn't important at the moment. What mattered most was the battle. Apparently, Liu wanted to use Nietion's draconic power to unleash greater power. If he fought Minister Ming on his own, he wouldn't have been able to defeat him. Bring it on. Liu taunted Minister Ming fearlessly. Bring it on. You're just a little loach and an ant. You want to overturn the sky in front of a dragon? You're dreaming. Minister Ming said coldly. Then, torrential flames surged out of his mouth and turned into countless tongues of flame that shot towards Liu and Nietion. Nietion slightly narrowed his eyes. He instantly felt the excruciating pain of the flames, which made it hard for him to breathe. His cultivation was too low, and he couldn't even resist the remaining power of the flames. Liu frowned and stepped forward. 9 pairs of red angelic wings appeared on his back, covering the sky and blocking the flames. Nietion felt much better when a dark red shield appeared around him. Very good. Minister Ming stepped back slightly with a sinister smile on his face. He said in a deep voice, I underestimated you. You can condense 9 pairs of angelic wings in the 5th level of the Sky Martial Realm. You're the first person I've ever seen. Let me see how strong your angelic wings are. Minister Ming laughed coldly, and the wings of fire rose from his back. Suddenly, flames filled the sky, and the surrounding area fell into a sea of fire. 9 Heavens Imperial Demon, break. Liu's eyes narrowed, and he took out the 9 Heavens Imperial Demon Spear again. A mighty chi burst out and turned into a huge shadow of the spear, rushing towards Minister Ming. Minister Ming smirked and smashed the shadow of the spear with his palm. Then, he used the momentum to attack Liu at an extremely fast speed. Liu's eyes trembled. The 9 Heavens Imperial Demon Spear danced in the air and attacked Minister Ming. Boom! The next moment, the 2 forces collided and the wild power shook the world. Ming Shanshu's figure froze and stopped abruptly. Liu flew backwards. Before he could stand firm, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 42-49. Liu's gaze was filled with killing intent. A terrifying aura surged from his body. It was incomparably dark, and he felt as if he had been reborn. Did he hide his strength just now? Nietion frowned as he thought to himself. Liu's aura was much stronger than before. However, he had clearly been heavily injured, so why had his strength increased? Interesting. It seems that I have to take this battle seriously. Minister Ming also felt the change in Liu's aura. His eyes darkened as he spoke with a grim expression. He had to admit that he had underestimated Liu's strength. Although he was still very calm, he was worried. He could sense that there was a hidden power in Liu's body that made him feel threatened. 9th Heaven's Imperial Demon, Counter Dragon Slaughter. At that moment, Liu moved. The crimson wings on his back flapped, and he streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning. Wherever the spear pointed, the wind and clouds surged. Minister Ming took a step back. He didn't take the attack head-on. Boom! As the spear's shadow fell, the void trembled, and cracks actually appeared in it. Minister Ming was in a sorry state from the spear intent, but he wasn't injured. He stared at the crack that flashed across the sky, and his heart was filled with shock. With his cultivation, it would be difficult for an ordinary cultivator of the 5th level of the Heaven Realm to injure him, even if he stood still. But Liu's attack was peerlessly domineering. If he hadn't retreated in time, he would have definitely been injured. Liu's strength was truly terrifying. He was no weaker than an ordinary cultivator of the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. Liu, you've truly amazed me. Minister Ming smiled and said, If I don't kill you today, you'll become a great threat in the future. He rejoiced that he had personally come to the Bloodwing Academy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known that there was someone hiding in the Bloodwing Academy who wanted to take revenge on him. Fortunately, Liu's current level of cultivation was not high and his wings had yet to fully develop. If he was given a bit more time and his level of cultivation increased, he would probably become a disaster that would destroy the Ming family. So much nonsense, shouted Liu. The 9th Heaven's Imperial Demon danced in the sky. The spear intent condensed into a storm that swept up the dark clouds. Come! Minister Ming gave a low roar, and the 9 pairs of flame wings on his back burned. The surroundings immediately became a boundless sea of fire. Boom, boom, boom. Chi, chi, chi. The world rumbled endlessly, and the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. When the crowd below saw this scene, they were shocked to the extreme. Who would have thought that the heavily injured Li Yu would be able to fight Minister Ming to such an extent? Li Yu, who exactly are you? Shengguang Mushue's gaze was as sharp as a blade as he locked onto Li Yu from afar. The shock in his heart made him question Li Yu's identity. Since Li Yu was able to condense angel wings, he must be a member of the angel tribe. However, his bloodline power was very strange. It was very similar to the angels of light, but there were also some differences. What was even stranger was that Li Yu's angel wings were blood red in color. This wasn't something an angel of light could do. However, its bloodline was definitely not that of the Dark Knight Angel clan. It was as if there was some kind of power in his bloodline that caused his angel bloodline to mutate. However, it was extremely rare to find a power that could cause an angel bloodline to mutate. It should be stronger than the angel bloodline, or at least on par with it. Roar! Just as Shengguang Mushue was feeling bewildered, a dragon's roar was suddenly heard from the sky. It resounded through the 9 heavens, piercing through the clouds and cracking rocks. Dragon energy? Shengguang Mushue's eyes widened in shock. This aura was clearly dragon energy. However, how was this possible? Li Yu was a member of the angel tribe. How could there be dragon energy in his body? Mu Tian did have dragon energy in his body, but he was too weak. In front of powerhouses like Li Yu and Minister Ming, his aura had long been concealed. Kill! Suddenly, an angry roar was heard from the sky. A 10,000-meter-long shadow of a demonic dragon appeared. Its enormous aura suppressed everything as it pounced towards Minister Ming. Minister Ming clearly did not expect this to happen. He was stunned for a moment before the 9 pairs of flame wings on his back fluttered wildly. Rays of flame energy fell like lightning towards the demonic dragon. Boom, boom, boom. A series of violent explosions rang out. Under the impact of the violent force, raging waves surged. Minister Ming and Li Yu were instantly engulfed. The crowd stared at the sky in a daze. The shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. Could Li Yu be related to the dragon tribe? Shengguang Mushue was shocked, but at the same time, he was filled with endless doubts. He could not understand how Li Yu could have such a powerful dragon energy in his body. Li Yu clearly had the dragon tribe's bloodline. However, the angel tribe's rules forbade marriage with the dragon tribe. Child of taboo. Shengguang Mushue suddenly thought of something. It was as if something had hit his heart, causing him to be momentarily stunned. A long time ago, he remembered that the angel tribe once had a peerless genius named Shengguang Yitian. He was the younger brother of the current angel emperor, Shengguang Huaiyu. Shengguang Yitian was supposed to become the next emperor, but he committed a grave mistake by falling in love with a girl from the dragon tribe. They even had a child together, and that child was the child of taboo. This matter caused a great sensation back then. The dragon tribe and the angel tribe strongly opposed it. In the end, Shengguang Yitian committed suicide. The girl from the dragon tribe was imprisoned, and their child was secretly killed. Seeing Li Yu's divine might, Shengguang Mushue could not help but think of the child of taboo. Could it be that the child of taboo is not dead? Shengguang Mushue's eyes trembled. He was shocked beyond words. If that was really the case, it would definitely cause a great stir in the angel tribe and the dragon tribe. Bang! Just as Shengguang Mushue was overwhelmed with shock, a muffled sound was heard. Li Yu's figure flew backward like a kite with a broken string. He fell straight down and then stabilized himself in midair. On the other side, Minister Ming's figure also appeared. There were several wounds on his body, and his whole body was dripping with blood. However, he had only suffered superficial wounds, while Li Yu had suffered fatal ones. He still lost. Shengguang Mushue's eyes trembled. He felt as if his heart was being torn apart. Even though Li Yu's talent was astonishing, he had still lost to Minister Ming. After all, the difference in their strength was too great. He lost. The people below were horrified. It seemed that this battle was about to end. Are you all right? In midair, Nietian stood behind Liu and asked in a deep voice. Chapter 4250. The Power of the Dragon Farmer. Nietian's eyes widened when he heard this name. He had been waiting for this moment. He naturally understood that Liu had asked him to be a helper, not because of his combat strength, but because he needed his with dragon power. Without the power of the dragon farmer, Liu would only be a burden to Nietian. Ha ha! At this moment, Minister Ming's maniacal laughter came from the sky. He shouted, Liu, you are indeed a genius. It's a pity that you have lost this battle. Is that so? Liu's lips curled into a cold smile. He released his aura crazily. Waves of violent energy surged out like raging waves, shaking the void. Suddenly, Nietian felt an intense agitation in his blood. He was about to lose control of his power. Nietian, release your power, Liu said in a low voice. His eyes turned as black as the abyss, and he released an extremely dark power. The surroundings became dark and gloomy, as if the end of the world had come. Nietian was shocked. He activated his star bloodline and activated the power of the dragon farmer. The void was filled with the power of a dragon, as if thousands of dragons were roaring. The enormous power of the dragon farmer was absorbed by Liu in an instant. Suddenly, a terrifying aura surged in the sky, as if the dark night was devouring the world. This is a blood sacrifice. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was filled with shock. He had been wondering why Liu was able to release such an enormous power, even though he was seriously injured. Now, he finally understood. Liu was using a blood sacrifice. He was using the power of his blood to stimulate the limits of his martial body. Although this method could increase one's power instantly, it would also cause great harm to the martial body. If it was light, the user would be weakened for a few years. If it was heavy, the user's martial foundation would be damaged. This battle was too important to Liu. It was not only for the Angel Clan, but also for the sake of avenging his master. To him, Li Xing was his closest relative, the most important person in his life. After he had seen Li Xing killed, avenging his master had become the most important thing in his heart. This be Astra's starred. He's trying to scam Nietian. Immediately, Fat Cat shouted in anger. Liu had used the blood sacrifice to stimulate his own power, but he needed Nietian's bloodline power. Therefore, when Nietian activated his bloodline power, he would definitely suffer the pressure of the blood sacrifice. Nietian's strength was incomparable to Liu's. If the power of the blood sacrifice could seriously injure Liu, then it could directly kill Nietian. What kind of power is this? At this moment, Nietian felt a terrifying power rushing towards his martial body, causing his expression to change. Retreat. He looked at Liu. The latter roared, and a terrifying power soared into the sky, shaking the heavens and earth. Bang! Before Nietian could react, he was hit by a terrifying force. His body flew backwards, leaving a trail of blood in the air. At the same time, Liu's body moved. The ninth heaven imperial devil broke through the sky, and the roar of a dragon shook the heavens. Endless spear will surged out like rolling dark clouds. The extreme power of darkness finally erupted completely. How is this possible? Minister Ming stood coldly in the sky, feeling the dark pressure rushing towards him. He could not help but tremble and exclaim in shock. He had never dreamed that Liu would be able to explode with such terrifying power when he was seriously injured. The crowd below felt the overwhelming pressure high up in the sky, and their expressions became sluggish. Nietian stabilized his body, but there were many deep, bloody scars on his body. A dark aura surged as if he had been burned by flames. However, the terrifying power in his body did not disappear. Instead, it became more and more violent, as if it wanted to devour him. Nietian, hurry up and stabilize your aura. Do not use your power again, Fat Cat said nervously. Fat, what's going on? Nietian took a deep breath and landed on the ground. He wanted to stabilize his blood vessels, but he was shocked to find that his blood vessels were surging and agitated. Even his 9 yuan meridians were about to explode. Immediately, the wounds on his body split open, and his entire body became a bloody mess. Oh no! Fat Cat's expression changed drastically. The power of the blood sacrifice was too strong. Yet Tion could not suppress it at all. Hold your breath and focus. Guard your blood vessels with your soul. Just as his blood vessels were about to go out of control, a voice rang out. Then, Tion felt a powerful force surging into his body, forcefully suppressing the agitated power. Dean! Tion turned around and saw a familiar face. He exclaimed in surprise. Don't speak, Xinguang Mushua said in a deep voice. He used the power of his blood vessels to suppress the power of the blood sacrifice. Tion nodded. He followed Xinguang Mushua's power and slowly stabilized the agitated blood vessels in his body. At the same time, Liyu's aura exploded to the extreme. He moved and pointed his spear at Minister Ming like a raging dragon that suppressed the heavens and earth. You want to kill me? You're dreaming, shouted Minister Ming. His 9 pairs of angel wings flapped, and flames rose to the sky. A violent aura filled the air, and a sea of fire rushed out, burning everything in its path. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the two forces collided. The sky and earth shook. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Darkness and fire clashed. Light and darkness collided. Waves of energy flooded the sky, and the air trembled. It was about to be torn apart. The crowd looked at the sky in astonishment. They could not believe that a cultivator in the 5th Tianqi layer was able to create such a battle. Liu and Minister Ming were engulfed by the waves of energy. Only the sound of the impact could be heard. The crowd held their breaths as they stared at the sky. Their breaths almost stopped. After a long time, the chaos slowly cleared up. 2 figures gradually became clear. They were Liu and Minister Ming. Liu stood there coldly like a demonic spear bathed in blood. His eyes were as sharp as a blade. He stared coldly at Minister Ming. Minister Ming's hair was fluttering in the wind. He wasn't injured at all, but his expression was dull. The corners of his mouth were twitching. He seemed to want to say something, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make a sound. The crowd looked at the 2 silhouettes in a daze. They didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. They couldn't even tell who had won the battle. On the surface, it seemed like Liu had lost. However, the atmosphere at the scene made people feel that something was wrong. It was very strange. Master, I've avenged you, said Liu at that moment. At this moment, Liu opened his mouth. The redness and darkness in his eyes receded, and his eyes regained their clarity. His expression became tranquil, like a person who had been persisting for a long time had finally let go of the obsession in his heart. Chapter 42:51. The bloody scene in the sky shocked everyone present. No one had expected that Liu would be the final victor of this earth-shattering battle. We won, Tion said blankly as he looked at Liu, as if he had just woken up from a dream. Even though he had already guessed that this would be the result, he was still shocked when the dust finally settled. At that moment, Liu's body suddenly trembled. Like a broken leaf, she fell to the ground. Liu, Xinguang Mushue reacted quickly. His body moved like lightning as he stretched out his hand. A vigorous yet soft force supported Liu, allowing her to land safely. Xinguang Mushue sensed Liu's aura and said worriedly, "His aura is very weak. We must treat him immediately. I'll bring him to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. There's someone there who can treat him." Tion nodded slightly. He suppressed the intense pain in his body and took Liu, preparing to head to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. But at this moment, dozens of powerful auras appeared in the surrounding void. They were like mountains, suppressing the world and making it tremble. Xinguang Mushue furrowed his brows and swept his gaze over. Then he said in a deep voice, "The battle just now has ended. Minister Ming's death in Liu's hands was purely his own fault. If you stop now, today's matter will end here. If you're still around, if you insist on being stubborn, then I will lead the entire Bloodwing and fight to the end." His voice wasn't loud, but it was like a clap of thunder in the ears of those experts from the aristocratic families. Minister Ming's death was something they had not expected at all. As the head of the Ming family, Minister Ming had a high reputation among the aristocratic families. Although his death could not shake the foundations of the aristocratic families, it was a great blow. At this time, if they directly counterattacked and massacred Bloodwing Academy would most likely not be able to resist. However, doing so would definitely consume his strength. Once the main angel faction arrived, they wouldn't be able to withstand the Bloodwings. Most importantly, the battle just now had allowed them to witness Bloodwing's strength. It also made them wary of the strength of the main angel type. Xinguang Muxue spoke at this moment. As long as they left, he would let bygones be bygones. To them, this was indeed a good way to step down. The atmosphere was deathly silent and oppressive. The aristocratic families did not respond for a long time, and Xinguang Muxue did not dare to act rashly. This is a matter between the Ming family and Bloodwing Academy. We will no longer interfere. After a long time, a low voice rang out. Then, several dozen figures began to slowly leave. Soon, the figures of the experts from the aristocratic families disappeared, and the oppressive aura in the void disappeared without a trace. When Xinguang Muxue sensed the disappearance of the last powerful aura, his taut nerves finally relaxed. Although these aristocratic families seemed to be on the same side on the surface, there was a certain amount of competition between them. If their hearts weren't united, they would inevitably fall apart. Dean, I'll go to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion right now. Nie Tian didn't waste any time and spoke directly. Xinguang Muxue nodded slightly and sent a voice transmission to Yi Feng, asking him to protect him in secret. Since these aristocratic families had already retreated, they probably wouldn't make another move. Xinguang Muxue remained in the academy to calm the hearts of the people. After all, the previous incident had a huge impact on everyone. Bloodwing Academy had just escaped a calamity. Nie Tian brought Li Yu and quickly arrived at the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Su Qing had been waiting outside the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for a long time. Upon seeing Nie Tian arrive, he nervously asked, Nie Tian, are you all right? He had already heard about what had happened in Bloodwing Academy and had been worried. However, he wasn't a battle-type cultivator, so even if he went over, it would be useless. He could only wait. I'm fine. Hurry up and take a look at Li Yu. Nie Tian quickly walked into the hall of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. He could sense that Li Yu's aura was extremely weak, even faintly discernible. Su Qing took Li Yu and checked the latter's condition. Then, he signaled Nie Tian to wait outside and brought Li Yu into the inner hall. Nie Tian stood guard outside the inner hall and immediately inquired about Rui Qianyu's condition. Fat, is Rui Qianyu all right? Previously, Rui Qianyu had been seriously injured. He didn't know how she was doing now. She's fine. Her condition has stabilized. She just needs to rest and recuperate for a period of time. Fat Cat said solemnly. Nie Tian, take a look at yourself first. That guy's blood sacrifice power isn't that easy to suppress. You have to handle it carefully. Blood sacrifice power? Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard these words. Fat Cat immediately explained, that guy's strength is much stronger than yours. The blood sacrifice power didn't have much of an impact on him. However, your cultivation is too low. If the blood sacrifice power isn't handled properly, it's very likely that your bloodline will be damaged. Nie Tian nodded solemnly and began to carefully check the condition of his body. Previously, when the blood sacrifice power erupted, Xinguang Muxue helped him to suppress it. Now that he checked again, it seemed that the blood sacrifice power had weakened a lot and was slowly stabilizing. I should be fine. The power of my bloodline is very strong. It won't be easy for the blood sacrifice power to hurt me. Nie Tian let out a long sigh of relief. Fat Cat didn't respond. He had already checked Nie Tian's condition. Although everything was normal at the moment, he still felt that something was wrong. However, he couldn't be sure now. After all, even Nie Tian didn't feel anything wrong. About half an hour later, Su Qing walked out. His face didn't look good and was a little pale. Brother Su, how's Li Yu? Nie Tian stepped forward and asked anxiously. His condition has stabilized. However, his injuries are too serious, and his bloodline has been greatly damaged. My ability is limited, so I can only help him stabilize his bloodline first. If we want a complete treatment, we can only wait for teacher to return." Su Qing frowned and said solemnly. Nie Tian nodded. Although Su Qing played it down, he could feel that Li Yu's injuries were very troublesome. "Brother Su, this is the extreme blood pill I took from Ming Yufeng. Hurry up and save Zhu Shi." At this moment, Nie Tian thought of Zhu Shi and immediately took out the extreme blood pill and handed it to Su Qing. Su Qing took the blood pill and asked Nie Tian to wait outside. He turned around and walked into the inner hall. However, at this moment, he seemed to suddenly remember something. He turned around and said, "Nie Tian, an old man came looking for you not long ago." "An old man?" Nie Tian frowned and his heart sank. "That old man's aura is very strange. I can't sense his strength, but judging from his eyes, he should be a pinnacle expert." Su Qing frowned as if there was something he couldn't say. "Why did he come looking for me?" Nie Tian asked directly when he saw Su Qing's hesitation. "I asked him, but he didn't want to say much. He only mentioned a very strange bloodline power and told me to pass on a message to you." Su Qing frowned even more deeply and said solemnly. Chapter 42-52. The evil woman must not be left alive. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard these words. The evil woman was undoubtedly the 10 Annihilation evil woman, Rui Qinyu. It seemed that the awakening of Rui Qinyu's bloodline had alerted some people hiding in the dark. Su Qing could guess that things were not as simple as it seemed after seeing Nie Tian's reaction. He really wanted to know what was going on, but he did not ask. He was someone who knew his priorities. It was better not to ask about things that he was not supposed to know. After a while, Nie Tian became cold and asked in a deep voice, "Brother Su, where is that old man now?" Su Qing nodded and said, "He has left, but he said that he will come and find you again." "Thank you." Nie Tian expressed his gratitude. He knew that the old man would not leave. Instead of wasting time looking for him, it was better to wait quietly. Then, Su Qing went into the inner hall to treat Zhu Shi. Nie Tian's heart felt heavy as he thought about the old man. "Nie Tian, actually, I wanted to tell you before. The 10 exterminations of the evil woman is related to a very ancient prophecy of the end of the world. Once it is awakened, it will definitely attract some uninvited guests." At this time, Little Fat Cat's voice sounded, "The old man has arrived." That old man has arrived and didn't show too much of an attitude. Perhaps it's not a bad thing. "What do you mean?" Nie Tian frowned in confusion. The 10 Annihilation evil woman once caused a world-ending crisis. Although the crisis has been resolved, there must be some forces in hiding, waiting for the 10 Annihilation evil woman to come again. I speculate that the old man did not come from such a force, or else he would not have left so easily. The fat cat explained, as if he was trying hard to remember something, but he could not recall it no matter how hard he tried. Although he had grown his 9th tail, there were some ancient memories in his bloodline that could not be fully unlocked due to the long period of time. "Fat, you mean that someone wants to kill Ruoyu?" Nie Tian asked with a tremble in his eyes when he heard the danger Fat Cat mentioned. "Yes." The fat cat was silent for a moment. Then it nodded and said hesitantly, "I'm not sure who that old man is. Currently, Bloodwing Academy situation is still unstable. Why don't you stay here and wait for that old man to appear?" Nie Tian thought for a moment and decided to temporarily stay in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Qing Chi should be back soon. With him around, he would feel more assured. For the next few days, Nie Tian stayed in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. On one hand, he paid attention to Li Yu and Zhu Shi's situation, and on the other hand, he waited for Rui Qinyu to recover. He had not told Rui Qinyu about the mysterious old man, as he did not want her to worry too much. Soon, 3 days had passed. Zhu Shi had almost recovered, but Li Yu was still in a coma. Her condition was unknown. Su Qing did not have much confidence, so he did not dare to take any risks. He could only help Li Yu maintain her current state. Rui Qinyu had also recovered well, especially after being with Nie Tian. She had become much more cheerful. Such days made Nie Tian feel peaceful and fulfilled, and he was also very happy. However, he knew that such peaceful days were numbered. He could already feel the signs of an impending storm. Then another 3 days passed, but the old man still did not show up. Although Nietian was not anxious, the worry in his heart was growing heavier. On the other side, Qing Qi had also not returned. Li Yu's condition was getting worse. Zhu Shi decided to bring Li Yu to the ancestral dragon's abyss. That was the ancestral land of the dragon clan. Zhu Rushuang was also there, so she should have a way to save Li Yu. Su Qing did not object to Zhu Shi's decision. It seemed that he already knew the relationship between Zhu Shi and Li Yu. Everyone packed up and prepared to leave the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. However, at this moment, a figure appeared in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's hall like a ghost. Nietian looked at the figure and could not help but narrow his eyes. It was a face full of vicissitudes of life. Beneath the wrinkles, only a pair of eyes as sharp as an eagle's emitted a sharp light. Nietian only took a glance at the other party, but he had the illusion of falling into an abyss. The momentary feeling of powerlessness almost made him collapse. "It's you." At this moment, Su Qing reacted and exclaimed, "I said that he would come again." The old man laughed heartily, looking very pleased. "You?" Su Qing frowned and said in a deep voice, "You've never left the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, right?" "Smart." The old man nodded with a smile. "I just wanted to see what you were doing." "This?" Su Qing's eyes trembled, and he was completely stunned. The Myriad Yuan Pavilion was heavily guarded. Not only were there many experts secretly guarding it, but there were also extremely complicated arrays and boundaries. It was almost impossible for an ordinary person to enter the Myriad Yuan Pavilion without being noticed. However, this old man in front of him was able to silently hide in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for several days. How could he not be surprised? "You're the person looking for me?" At this moment, Nietian forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart and asked, "To be precise, I came to look for her." The old man smiled faintly, and his sharp gaze turned to Rui Qinyu. The expression in his eyes instantly changed and revealed a trace of respect. Nietian's heart tightened. This old man was indeed here for the 10 Annihilation evil woman. "Brother Zhu, you guys leave first." Nietian became cold and said to Zhu Shi. The 10 Annihilation evil woman had nothing to do with Zhu Shi and the others. Moreover, Li Yu's condition was not good, and they had to go to the ancestral dragon's abyss as soon as possible. "Wait." However, at that moment, the old man extended his hand to stop Zhu Shi. The corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile as he said, "If you don't want him to die, then don't take him anywhere." "What do you mean?" Zhu Shi's eyes trembled as he asked. The old man nodded and said, "The injury he suffered is the backlash of his bloodline after the blood sacrifice, which has damaged his martial arts foundation. Although his condition had stabilized, the power of the blood sacrifice had already seeped into his bloodline, causing his bloodline to be on the verge of collapse. In this kind of situation, if we don't know what's going on and directly help him force out the power of the blood sacrifice to restore his bloodline, even if we can save him, he will be a cripple for the rest of his life." This? Zhu Shi's eyes trembled, and he was stunned on the spot. With his current situation, the number of people in this world who can save him can be counted on one hand. The elder smiled faintly and said, "But you are very lucky. I am someone who can save him." Zhu Shi's eyes trembled again, and he immediately reacted. He actually took a step forward, knelt down, and begged, "Old mister, please lend me a helping hand. I, Zhu Shi, will definitely remember this kindness and never forget it." Chapter 4253. Me? Nietian was stunned by the old man's sudden words. He smiled faintly and said, "Old mister, I'm afraid you didn't come here just to ask me to beg you." The old man smiled faintly and said, "Nietian, you are a smart man. You should know that there is a price to pay for asking someone for help. Furthermore, the person in front of you is not an ordinary person. Once he dies, it will affect the life and death of the two tribes. Therefore, his life is very important. If it's too heavy, we must use another life of equivalent weight to save it." "What do you mean by that, mister?" Nietian could tell that the old man was implying something. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as his heart tightened. If I want you to exchange your life for his, would you be willing to do so? The old man's calm expression suddenly changed. The calmness in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by coldness. His eyes were like sharp blades that locked onto Rui Qianyu. Nietion's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He took a step forward and stood in front of Rui Qianyu. He asked coldly, "What do you think?" He had already guessed the old man's identity and knew that the old man was here for the 10 Annihilation's evil woman. However, the old man's direct coercion made him angry. Li Yu's life was indeed very important. It was related to the 3 prophecies of the dragon tribe and the angel tribe's forbidden child. If she died, it would most likely lead to something that would decide the fate of the 2 tribes. However, it was obviously impossible for Nietion to exchange Rui Qianyu's life for Li Yu's. There was no such thing as a noble life. How could it be exchanged so easily? The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became tense. A hidden pressure made it difficult for everyone to breathe. Su Qing's face suddenly changed. His forehead was covered in sweat. His lips trembled slightly, but he could not say a word. The old man had been able to hide in the Wan Yuan pavilion for several days without anyone noticing. It was hard to imagine how powerful he was. Even though the Wan Yuan pavilion was guarded by dozens of sky martial arts divine ancestor level powerhouses, they might not be a match for the old man. Most importantly, the old man was so close to them. Once he attacked, it would be instantaneous. Nietion and the others would not have a chance to fight back at all. "Sir, I'm willing to exchange my life for his." At this moment, a voice broke the silence. Zhu Shi stood up and spoke with a serious expression. "Your life?" The old man's gaze swept over Zhu Shi, but his tone was extremely disdainful as he said directly, "Forgive I for speaking bluntly, but your life is not heavy enough." This. Zhu Shi was stunned and couldn't speak for a moment. He was a smart man. He could vaguely tell that the old man was here for Rui Qianyu. He was completely unfamiliar with Rui Qianyu. He only knew that she had suddenly appeared next to Nietion and was extremely close to Nietion. He knew nothing else. He had secretly probed Rui Qianyu's aura. There was a hidden force in her body, which shocked him greatly. He even felt that Rui Qianyu was more terrifying than Nietion. "Nietion, you should know who she is. Hand her over to I. Not only can you save your friends, but you can also save the world. Isn't that good?" The old man's face changed again. His gaze wandered around Nietion's face as he tried to persuade him. "Save the world?" Nietion frowned and sneered. "If I can't even protect the people around me, how can I save the world?" Then his face darkened and he said directly, "You're not here to save people. What's your purpose? Just tell me." "Nietion, I have seen many stupid people in my life, but it's my first time seeing someone as stupid as you." The old man looked at Nietion and felt the determination in his eyes. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, before Nietion could react, he looked at Su Qing and said in a low voice, "Prepare a secret room and send him in. I will treat him there. No one is allowed to disturb him." "Ah, Su Qing was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted. He nodded in surprise and ran into the inner hall like a gust of wind. You want to save him?" Zhu Shi also reacted at this time. He was so overjoyed that he was speechless. He can't hold on any longer. It'll be too late if we don't save him now. The old man responded in a cold manner. He then glared at Nietion and said, "Kid, you're not allowed to go anywhere. Just wait for I in the hall." Nietion frowned. He was a little dumbfounded by this sudden change of events. Soon, everyone went into the inner hall, leaving only Nietion and Rui Qianyu in the hall. After a moment of silence, Rui Qianyu finally could not help but ask, "Nietion, what is the power that I've awakened in my body?" The 10 Annihilation evil woman. Nietion hesitated for a while and decided not to hide it anymore. He told her everything about the 10 Annihilation evil woman. When the 9 heavens evil woman descends, all worlds will be annihilated. After listening to Nietion, Rui Qianyu frowned slightly. She pondered for a while and then fell into a deep silence. "Qianya, the 10 Annihilation evil woman is only a kind of bloodline power. It's only stronger than other bloodlines, so it's regarded as a taboo by the world. After a while, Nietian said lightly, "The so-called doomsday prophecy is just a rumor. You don't have to worry about it." "A rumor?" Rui Qinyu forced a smile and sighed softly. "If that's the case, why didn't you tell me about it directly? And what's with this old man who suddenly appeared? I just don't want you to worry." Nietian was stunned for a while before he replied, "I don't care if the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman is a doomsday prophecy or a taboo. I only know that this power belongs to me, and no one can take it away." The expression in Rui Qinyu's eyes changed slightly. It seemed to have returned to its previous coldness in an instant as she said in a deep voice, "Qinya, don't worry. As long as I'm here, I won't allow anyone to hurt you." Nietian frowned as he sensed the change in Rui Qinyu and said in a heavy tone. Rui Qinyu looked at Nietian with a trace of sadness on her exquisite and beautiful face. She said lightly, "What if I'm the one who hurts others?" You won't." Nietian was stunned and panicked as he hurriedly said, "Are you sure?" The corner of Rui Qinyu's mouth twitched as a trace of evil appeared on her face. "I'm sure." Nietian nodded and said, "You're a kind person. You won't hurt others. In this world, kindness is probably equal to weakness." Rui Qinyu smiled bitterly and looked into the distance. Nietian was stunned. He could not understand why Rui Qinyu's change was so sudden and strange. "It's that old man." At this moment, the fat cat screamed and said, "What did he do to Rui Qinyu?" Chapter 4254. In the main hall of Myriad Yuan Pavilion, Nietian looked at Rui Qinyu. The darkness hidden in her eyes sent chills down his spine. In the past, Rui Qinyu was cold and indifferent, but that was all. However, at this moment, Nietian could see the endless abyss behind her eyes. He could vaguely sense that a certain dark attribute in Rui Qinyu had been completely stimulated. Everyone had a dark side, just like how Nietian had demonized and even gave birth to the Devil's Knight. However, throughout his journey, he had stuck to his original intentions and guarded the justice in his heart. He had never slacked off, so he had a clear conscience. Rui Qinyu was a person of light, but now the clarity in her eyes had disappeared. The atmosphere was silent and even a little depressing. "They're out," Rui Qinyu said faintly when Su Qing and the old man appeared. Nietian saw that Su Qing and the others were overjoyed. It was obvious that Li Yu's condition had improved. "Old mister, you're really a miracle doctor. I thank you on behalf of Brother Li." Su Qing was a little excited. He was very impressed by the old man's extraordinary skills. Nietian was also very surprised. The fact that the old man had managed to heal Li Yu in such a short period of time was indeed very surprising. He was even more certain that the old man had done something to Rui Qinyu to cause such a change in her. "Don't thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Nietian." With a smile on his face, the old man walked directly to Nietian and Raindrop's side and said, "Let's talk." "Okay." Nietian glanced at Rui Qinyu and nodded. Since the old man had come for Rui Qinyu and had done something to her, plus he had saved Li Yu, it was obvious that he was plotting something. "We need a place to talk." The old man nodded and said to Su Qing, "Sir, please follow me." Su Qing was much calmer now. He nodded repeatedly and led the way. After a while, Nietian and the others came to a secret room in the inner hall. Su Qing said, "Old mister, this room is very secretive. Your conversation will never be leaked." The old man's lips curled into a smile as he nodded. "Old mister." Then, Su Qing hesitated for a moment and finally said, "My master is the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's pavilion master, Grandmaster Qing Qi. This brother Nietian has a good relationship with my master. He isn't a bad person. If he has offended old mister, I hope old mister can forgive him. My master, Great Master Qing Qi, please forgive me." The old man looked at Su Qing and smiled without saying a word. How could he not hear the threat in Su Qing's words? However, no one could change what he wanted to do. Su Qing frowned as he watched the three of them enter the room. He was obviously very worried. In the room, the three of them each stood in a triangular formation, giving off a sense of opposition. However, at this time, an unexpected scene happened. The old man suddenly knelt down, bowed deeply to Rui Qianyu, and said loudly, "I'm late. Please punish me, Your Majesty." Huh? Niet Tian was startled by this sudden scene and was stunned for a moment. What the hell is going on? Old servant? Empress? Where are all these things? Rui Qianyu was also puzzled, but her expression didn't change much. She just said faintly, "Stand up and talk." "Yes." The old man responded and stood up slowly. However, he didn't dare to look at Rui Qianyu again. He stood on the spot in fear and trepidation. "What's going on?" Rui Qianyu asked faintly, but her expression was as cold as ice. It seemed that all her emotional changes were covered by the darkness hidden deep in her eyes. "Please follow me back to the 10 Destruction Heaven Prison, Your Majesty. Once there, you will understand everything." The old man didn't answer her directly, but bowed and said, "What if I don't go back with you?" Rui Qianyu frowned. Although her tone was calm, there was a hint of oppression in it. "Then I will follow you until you change your mind." The old man didn't raise his head, but lowered his head and said. Rui Qianyu's gaze froze, and she became silent. The atmosphere once again fell into an oppressive silence. "Who the hell are you? What did you do to Royu? Why do you call her the Empress?" At this time, Niet Tian opened his mouth and asked coldly. At this moment, there were thousands of doubts in his mind, and they were tangled together, making him inexplicably restless. "Niet Tian, you already know enough about the Empress's identity," the Empress said. The old man finally raised his head and looked at Niet Tian with a cold gaze. He said, "The best decision for you now is to let go of everything about the Empress and let the Empress go. Her own path." "Her own path?" Niet Tianling laughed. "You mean the path you chose for her? What did you do to her?" "I am the Empress's most loyal servant. How would I dare to disrespect the Empress?" The old man frowned and said, "If it wasn't for the fact that you helped the Empress awaken her bloodline, I would have killed you a long time ago. So, you were kind to me?" Niet Tian's gaze flickered, and he asked coldly, "Of course." The old man laughed and said, "You are alive because of the Empress's kindness. If you don't know what's good for you and continue to pester the Empress, then I won't mind killing you." "Kill me?" Niet Tianling laughed. "Then do you know my identity?" The old man sneered. "Niet Tian, don't try to use the people behind you to threaten I. To tell you the truth, even your predecessor, Dong Wang Jingrong, was not someone that I cared about." Niet Tian's pupils contracted upon hearing the name Dong Wang Jingrong. His expression froze. He didn't expect the old man to know that he was the Star Saint. The power of the stars is indeed powerful. The old man smiled again. Afterwards, he let out a long sigh and said, "Dong Wang Jingrong really is a prodigy. He was once the most dazzling existence in the saint's world, but he was harmed by a scoundrel." As he spoke, a wisp of a strange light flickered in his eyes, and he said, "Niet Tian, let me give you a piece of advice. Concealing one's ability and revealing one's ability is the way to protect yourself. If you reveal your ability too much, then Dong Wang Jingrong will be your example." "You?" Niet Tian was shocked again. He stared at the old man, speechless. He didn't expect the old man to say something so shocking. It seemed that the old man had a very powerful background, so powerful that he could ignore the Star Saint. Niet Tian originally thought that the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was the pinnacle of the saint's world, until the Sun God Sword Emperor and the others showed him the power of a super expert. Chapter 4255. In the room, Niet Tian was shocked by the elder's iceberg theory and fell into a long silence. "Niet Tian, you are a hidden talent. Don't be blinded by the gains and losses in front of you." Seeing that Niet Tian was silent, the elder smiled faintly. "You still have a long way to go. One day, your power will be enough to influence the entire All Heavens sacred world. At that time, you will be qualified to stand side by side with the Empress." "Stand side by side?" Niet Tian's eyes trembled, and he smiled inwardly. It turned out that in the elder's eyes, he was not qualified to stand side by side with Rui Qianyu. When he thought of this, he suddenly found it rather funny. This old man had appeared out of the blue and had also proclaimed Ryu Qinya to be the empress for no reason. Then he had said some unverified words and wanted to take Ryu Qinya away from him. Was this not laughable? Even funnier was that he had almost compromised. The scene in front of him was very similar to the time when the Mo clan had tried to take Mo Rushi away in the 3,000 Small Worlds. Back then, Nyetian had been fearless of heaven and earth, as well as ghosts and gods. Even when facing the Mo clan, which was far more powerful than him, he hadn't shown the slightest fear. But now, with the identity of the Star's sacred leader and the support of many experts, he began to think too much and weigh the gains and losses. He did not want to admit it, but he had to admit that his edge and drive had been greatly restrained along the way. As the elder had said, hiding one's edge and showing one's intellect was the way to protect oneself. Suddenly, he looked up at the elder. The latter's eyes were as deep as an abyss, but he could sense a hint of cunning. It was as if he was proud of controlling his opponent. It seemed to be saying that he had no choice but to accept it. Sir, you don't know what Ruiyu and I have been through, so you have no right to comment on what happened between us. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, I know that you've affected her mind with some kind of method. Everything she has done now is not from her heart. None of her decisions come from her heart, so I won't let her go. The old man was taken aback by Nyetian's words. Clearly, he did not expect Nyetian to have such a reaction. From his point of view, Nyetian was already under his control. As long as Rui Qinyu asked, Nyetian would have no choice but to agree no matter how helpless he was. But now, Nyetian's unyielding attitude was something he didn't expect, and it caught him off guard. Rui Qinyu looked at Nyetian and frowned slightly. She seemed to want to say something, but didn't. The darkness in her eyes dimmed a little. What if it's unsafe for the Empress to stay here? The old man calmed down, looked at Nyetian, and questioned, Do you know how many people are targeting the Empress and want her life? As long as I'm here, she'll be here. Nyetian replied coldly and firmly. For the Empress, are you willing to be the enemy of everyone in the world? The old man's eyes glowed as he asked coldly. If everyone in the world wants to kill her, so what if I'm the enemy of the world? Nyetian's eyes flickered as he said in a serious tone. You? The old man growled. He suddenly felt as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest, rendering him speechless. Nyetian's stubbornness and toughness exceeded his expectations. After a while, Nyetian's expression calmed down and he said, It doesn't matter if she's the Ten Annihilation's evil woman or the Water Monarch. In my eyes, she's Rua Yuchinya. This has never changed. No matter what she has to bear in the future, I will shoulder it together with her. His words fell into Rui Qinyu's ears, but was like a drop of water falling into the deep river, stirring up layers of ripples. The darkness in her eyes dimmed a little. Nyetian, what the Empress has to bear in the future is something you can't bear. The old man looked at Nyetian and said cold. Nyetian smiled and said, What I can bear is something you can't imagine. The old man's eyes trembled violently. The tenacity and sharpness in Nyetian's eyes made him shudder for a moment. However, he did not give up and said directly, If I insist on taking the Empress away, can you stop him? I won't go with you. As soon as he finished speaking, Rui Qinyu said directly, No matter what happens, I will stay by Nyetian's side and be with him. Your Majesty, you. The old man's expression changed, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by Rui Qinyu. The latter said cold, I'm the Empress. This is my order. This. The old man froze and was speechless. He obviously did not expect Rui Qinyu to use her identity as the Empress to control him. Rui Qinyu looked at Nyetian and nodded with a smile. There was a hint of gentleness in her eyes. The old man's expression froze, and he could not react for a long time. Everything was under his control just now. Why did he suddenly lose control? After a long time, the old man calmed down and sighed. Empress, since you are not willing to return to the Ten Destruction Heaven prison with me, I can only stay by your side. Sir, how should I address you? Nyetian stepped forward and asked calmly before Rui Qinyu said anything. Nyetian had many questions about this old man's identity. Yu Jing. The old man looked at Nyetian and hesitated for a while before saying his name. Elder Yu, you said that there are people who want Ruoyu's life. Who are they? Nyetian nodded and continued to ask. A very ancient force. It should have existed since the all-heaven sacred realm was formed. Yu Jing's eyes darkened. Rumor has it that this organization's responsibility is to maintain the balance of the all-heaven sacred realm. A long time ago, the all-heaven sacred realm was one. Then, a near-destructive disaster happened, and the all-heaven sacred realm collapsed, forming the many sacred realms that we know today. After the all-heaven sacred realm was formed, that organization began to maintain the stability and balance of the various realms. They ruled the entire all-heaven sacred realm as their protector. However, after a long time, this organization gradually hid behind the scenes and controlled everything in the dark. Now, many top forces in the all-heaven sacred realm are actually controlled by this organization. For example, the Heaven's Sacred Pavilion and the 5 academies that you know of. Then, Yu Jing's eyes flickered and he continued. So, it's not safe for the Empress to stay here. Nyetian's heart skipped a beat and he fell silent. Yu Jing's words were too shocking to him. Who would have thought that the famous Heaven's Sacred Pavilion and the 5 academies were just puppets of a hidden force? After a while, Nyetian became cold and asked, Elder Yu, what exactly is this force? Rui Qianyu's eyes flickered. She wanted to know who was threatening her. Chapter 4256. When Yu Jing mentioned the Hall of the Mortal Emperor, Nyetian was astounded. This was because he had once seen a person who was revered as the Mortal Emperor, Yu Zhangxiong. More importantly, Yu Zhangxiong was known as the protector of the heavens. The Hall of the Mortal Emperor that Yu Jing mentioned existed as the protector of the All Saints world. There were so many coincidences. Logic told Nyetian that Yu Zhangxiong was definitely connected to the Hall of the Mortal Emperor. He might even be the master of the Mortal Emperor. Nyetian did not dare to guess just how important Yu Zhangxiong's identity was. However, he knew that Demon God Qi and Emperor Karma Su had once obeyed this person. Demon God Qi and Di Kuan Su. One was a demon god of the Angel Clan, while the other was a taboo of the Dragon Clan. Their powers were at an unbelievable level, yet Yu Zhangxiong was able to make both of them submit to him. It was enough to show how terrifying he was. The Hall of the Mortal Emperor was definitely the most terrifying existence in the All Saints world. Nyetian, do you know about the Hall of the Mortal Emperor? Yu Jing could not help but frown when he saw Nyetian's expression change. No, Nyetian shook his head. But I once saw a person who was revered as the Mortal Emperor. The Mortal Emperor. Yu Jing's eyes narrowed in shock. That's the master of the Hall of the Mortal Emperor. His name was Yu Zhangxiong, and I saw him in the ancestral grounds of the 4 ancient sacred clans. To be exact, I didn't see Yu Zhangxiong in person, but his soul. Nyetian nodded slightly, calmed himself, and told Yu Zhangxiong that he had met in the ancient heaven. He told Yu Jing everything that had happened. Yu Jing fell into deep thought after listening to Nyetian. He did not return to his senses for a very long time. He never thought that the young cultivator before him would have such a wondrous experience. Less than 100 people had heard of the Hall of the Mortal Emperor across the entire All Saints world, and the number of people who had actually seen the Mortal Emperor could be counted on one hand. However, it just so happened that Nyetian had met the human emperor, and they had made an agreement. After a while, Nyetian saw that Yu Jing had calmed down a little, so he asked, Old Yu, was the man I saw the real human sovereign? He really wanted to know if Yu Zhangxiong was the leader of the emperor's palace. I isn't sure either. Yu Jing shook his head and said, The master of the human sovereign hall is called the human sovereign, meaning that he is the most supreme among men. What you saw was a divine soul, so I guess that it was most likely an emperor from the previous generation, or even more ancient. It exists. I've heard that the 4 ancient sacred clans have a close relationship with the human emperor's palace. Every human emperor nominates the next human emperor. They'll look from the 4 ancient sacred clans first. Only when the 4 ancient sacred clans don't have a suitable candidate where they choose the outsiders, are looking for a new emperor. Since the person you saw was in the firmament steel of the 4 great ancient sacred clans, it's highly likely that he's the human emperor. In the end, Yu Jing nodded heavily. Apparently, he was very satisfied with his guess. Yes, Nie Tian nodded, feeling that Yu Jing's speculation was reasonable. He then frowned and asked, Elder Yu, why does the human emperor palace want to kill Ruyu? It's very simple. It's because Her Majesty the Empress is the prophesied evil woman who will destroy the world. Yu Jing smiled bitterly and said, Actually, it's not just the Empress. Any existence that threatens the balance of the Saint's world will be targeted by the human Emperor Hall. The balance of the sacred world? Nie Tian frowned, feeling a little confused. The human Emperor Palace doesn't allow people who are too powerful to exist. Yu Jing smiled again. His expression became much colder. He said, Actually, they don't care about the All-Heaven Saint's world. Instead, they care about their own control over it. Things that are too dazzling, not only is it a threat to the All-Heaven Sacred World, but it's also a threat to the Human Emperor's Palace. The Human Emperor's Palace has existed since the beginning of time and has long lost its original heart. What they want to maintain now is the absolute control of the Human Emperor Palace over the All-Heaven Sacred World. Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly. He said, So, they want to kill Ryu because her potential is too great and she might become a threat to them in the future. Am I right? You can say that. Yu Jing nodded slightly. Then, he looked at Nie Tian with a rather strange gaze. He said, Nie Tian, instead of worrying about the Empress, why don't you worry about yourself? Me? Nie Tian frowned and said, Does the Human Emperor Palace want to kill me too? Not now, but that doesn't mean they won't in the future. Yu Jing nodded. Then, he hesitated and said, You mustn't expose your identity. If they find out that you're the inheritor of the power of stars, you'll be in big trouble. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He suddenly thought of something and asked, Elder Yu, you just said that Senior Donghuang Zhengrong is a warning to me. What do you mean by that? Senior Donghuang's death has something to do with the Human Emperor's Palace? Nie Tian, you're smarter than I thought. Yu Jing's sunken eyes darkened. He seemed a little surprised. He pondered for a while and said, Speaking of which, I and Donghuang Zhengrong were friends. Although they weren't close, I still respected him. Yu Jing's sunken eyes darkened. Back then, there were too many strange things about Donghuang Zhengrong's sudden death. I heard from a friend that Donghuang Zhengrong died in the hands of the Heaven Lost Sacred Pavilion. However, no one in the Heaven Lost Sacred Pavilion could fight Donghuang Zhengrong. Even the Pavilion Master was no match for Donghuang Zhengrong. So, I guess that the people of the Heaven Lost Sacred Pavilion must have asked the Human Emperor's Palace for help. Then, Yu Jing sighed and said Donghuang Zhengrong was supposed to be the most dazzling existence in the past few million years. Unfortunately, he was too outstanding and attracted the attention of the Human Emperor's Palace. In the end, he was killed. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind, Nie Tian said after a moment of silence. He didn't completely believe Yu Jing's words, but he guessed it. Otherwise, Donghuang Zhengrong wouldn't have died so easily. Yes. Yu Jing nodded and patted Nie Tian's shoulder. He said, Young man, let me tell you this. Be 30% arrogant and 70% secretive. Only then will you be undefeatable. Nie Tian's eyes were deep. He didn't say anything. Today he knew too much. It was a huge blow to him, and he needed time to digest it. Empress, I don't dare to persuade you if you don't want to return to the 10 Destruction Heavenly Prison. However, this isn't a place to stay for long. Your aura has been exposed. The people from the Human Emperor's Palace will be here soon. We need to find a safe place. Rui Qinyu bowed slightly and said respectfully, You still want me to return to the 10 Destruction Heavenly Prison, right? Rui Qinyu replied indifferently. She sounded helpless. She heard the conversation between Nie Tian and Yu Jing clearly. She knew that Yu Jing didn't want to give up on bringing her back to the 10 Destruction Heavenly Prison. Empress, I will follow your decision. But Yu Jing slightly raised his head with a helpless expression. However, his expression suddenly changed. His old eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 4257. In the room, Yu Jing suddenly revealed a shocked expression. Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu immediately became nervous. Elder Yu, who's here? Nie Tian suppressed the fear in his heart, but his voice was clearly trembling. He had already guessed the answer from Yu Jing's reaction. He just did not want to admit it, or rather, he was unwilling to admit it. The human emperor's palace. Yu Jing said word by word with a deep look in his eyes. I knew it. Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and his heart tightened. Rui Qinyu did not have much of a reaction, but she could not hide the panic in her eyes. On the other hand, Yu Jing quickly calmed down and said in a deep voice, What will come. Since we can't avoid it, we can only face it head-on. As he spoke, he gestured for Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu to stay behind. He was about to leave. Elder Yu, you've already said that we can't avoid it. What's the point of us hiding here? Nie Tian took a step forward and said, I'd like to see just how powerful the people from the human emperor's palace are. Yu Jing frowned and glanced at Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu. He eventually nodded. He also knew that Rui Qinyu could not hide, so he might as well face it head-on. The three of them walked out of the room and arrived at the plaza outside the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Su Qing could not help but ask worriedly when he saw Nie Tian and the others' expressions as if they were facing a great enemy. Nie Tian, what happened? Brother Su, quickly send someone to send you away. It might not be safe here, Nie Tian whispered when he suddenly thought of Li Yu's identity. Since the human emperor's palace targeted everyone who was a threat to them, Li might be seen as a threat too. It's not safe. Su Qing frowned. He clearly did not understand. This was the Myriad Yuan Pavilion in Bloodwing City. Why would it not be safe? Although the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was not a peak faction in the All-Heaven Sacred World, it was definitely one of the few peak factions. There were only a handful of factions in the entire All-Heaven Sacred World that dared to challenge the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Su Qing did not understand what Nie Tian was afraid of. He didn't know much about Nie Tian, but he could tell that the latter wasn't a coward. He was even a little curious. What kind of person could make Nie Tian so nervous? Brother Su, trust me. Hurry up and send Li Yu away, said Nie Tian as he looked at Su Qing. All right. Su Qing was stunned for a moment before realizing the seriousness of the matter. He nodded and turned around to make arrangements. However, right at this moment, he felt a suffocating pressure being transmitted over, causing him to involuntarily turn around and look towards the sky. As far as his line of sight could see, a black-clothed figure stood like a towering mountain, with a powerful aura that deterred the heavens and earth. What a powerful aura! Nie Tian stared at that person in shock. The man's aura was much stronger than that of the 5 presidents and the Emperor's Angel. He was even more terrifying than Zhu Ru Shuang, and not much weaker than the 4 experts, including the Sun Godsword Emperor. After the figure's arrival, the surrounding void was under an extremely heavy pressure. The heavens and earth lost their color, and the wind and clouds surged as if a storm was brewing. Nie Tian, who is he? Su Qing's eyes flickered, and he could not help but look at Nie Tian. Although he was trying his best to remain calm, his voice could not help but tremble. Arrange for Li Yu to leave, said Nie Tian in a deep voice instead of explaining. Su Qing came back to his senses, nodded, and turned around to walk into the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. The person in the sky did not pay attention to Su Qing. Instead, he focused all his attention on Rui Qinyu. His eyes were cold and gloomy, filled with dense, killing intent. Then his figure moved and slowly descended. Nie Tian immediately felt the pressure in the surrounding space increase, causing his breathing to quicken. Nie Tian stepped back. At this moment, Yu Jing's voice was heard. Like the spring breeze and rain, it melted the pressure in the void. He then took a step forward and stood in front of Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu. The black-clothed figure in the air finally noticed Yu Jing and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. I was wondering who it was. So it's the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master. Yu Jing smiled and said calmly, Heaven Dao, Pavilion Master. Nie Tian exclaimed in his heart when he heard the name. He did not expect the person to be the Pavilion Master of the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Previously, Yu Jing mentioned that the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion, the 5 academies, and other forces were under the control of the Human Emperor Palace. However, the arrival of the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master was still unexpected. The Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was the most powerful force in the all-heavens sacred world, so it was not surprising that the Pavilion Master was so powerful. After knowing the identity of the Pavilion Master, Nie Tian's expression changed. He knew that Dong Wang Zhengrong's death was directly related to the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Brother Yu Jing, long time no see. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master lowered his body and stood dozens of meters in the air before he finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, but it was powerful and oppressive. It's been hundreds of thousands of years since we last met. I didn't expect that we would be enemies when we met again. Yu Jing smiled and seemed helpless. Yes. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master sighed and said, "Back then, we were both Hidden Sky warriors, and we fought for the title of the Hidden Sky champion many times." "Old friend, you must be joking." Yu Jing nodded and said, "Back then, you were the Hidden Sky champion, and I was only ranked second. I overestimated myself and challenged you 9 times in a row, but I failed every single time." The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master twitched his lips and said, "I'm surprised that you remember it so clearly. The past is still vivid in my mind. I can't forget it." Yu Jing sighed, but there was a rare sharpness in his eyes. He could tell that the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master was reminding him of the past. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master's meaning was clear. "Yu Jing, you were no match for me back then, and you are no match for me now. So stop struggling." When Ye Tian heard what the two of them said, he was puzzled. He didn't expect Yu Jing and the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master to be so close. He didn't expect them to be from the same generation. However, Yu Jing looked old and weak, while the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master looked like a middle-aged man who was in his prime. The lifespan of a warrior was related to his cultivation and bloodline. Normally, the higher the cultivation and the stronger the bloodline, the longer the lifespan. However, the lifespan of warriors of the same level shouldn't be too different. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master and Yu Jing used to be ranked first and second on the Hidden Sky roll. Even if there was a difference in their power, it shouldn't be too big. Why were their lifespans and appearances so different? Nie Tian guessed that if the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master didn't cultivate a technique that could extend his lifespan, it could be that Yu Jing's blood qi was deteriorating too quickly, causing him to age faster than his peers.